Warrior Lore. Chapter 328. Then, the seal weapon longsword began to crack from the tip. Piece by piece, the runes on the blade began to fall off as Du Xiaoyao chewed them up and swallowed them into her stomach. How could this be? Oh no. The tall and thin middle-aged man's expression changed drastically. His trembling body immediately retreated rapidly, but he could not shake off Du Xiaoyao at all. In less than 2 or 3 breaths of time, a priceless seal weapon had disappeared before his eyes, completely devoured. A seal weapon is indeed much better than a spirit weapon. It tastes so good. Du Xiaoyao floated in the air, a satisfied smile on her face. The short and fat middle-aged man also saw this scene, and his eyes were filled with shock. Swoosh, swoosh. At the same time, Yi Piaoling made her move. The serene python in her hand erupted with a large expanse of runic sword light that swept towards the short and fat middle-aged man. What kind of strange thing is this? The tall and thin middle-aged man stared at Du Xiaoyao, his face filled with shock. His eyes immediately turned cold. This seal weapon was something he had painstakingly obtained. With a wave of his hand, he sent out a palm strike, causing the air to tremble violently and rumble as it slammed towards Du Xiaoyao. Stormy Wave's palm. Du Xiaofu appeared beside Du Xiaoyao, talisman markings gushing out from his entire body, and the imposing aura on his body was fierce and shocking, like a ferocious beast that had awakened from its slumber. The surrounding space was like the surface of a boiling water as it ceaselessly fluctuated, and a palm print suddenly condensed out. Waves of energy visible to the naked eye rippled outwards as the palm struck towards the tall and thin middle-aged man. Boom, boom, boom. The two palms collided with each other, and in an instant, an explosive sound like muffled thunder suddenly rang out. Rumbling sounds of explosions could be heard all around, accompanied by waves of stormy runic force waves that continued to spread out, causing the entire surrounding space to shake. Bam bam! The tall and thin middle-aged man's figure staggered back a step. Waves of violent force rippled outwards, and even he was shaken. Chi la la! Du Xiaofu's figure directly brushed against the ground as he was pushed back. His feet scraped out 2 long deep trenches in the ground. Finally, he fiercely slammed into a huge rock. The rock behind him cracked and shattered into pieces. Then, faint golden blood flowed out of the corner of Du Xiaofu's mouth. So strong. Du Xiaofu was rather shocked. The Nirvana realm of the Martial Marquis realm was much stronger than the initial Martial Marquis realm. He could catch the opponent off guard and rely on the opponent's carelessness to kill the initial Martial Marquis realm, but in reality, it was quite difficult to deal with the initial Martial Marquis realm. And now, it was even more difficult to deal with the Nirvana realm Martial Lord. Du Xiaofu knew that it was impossible for him to match up. Although he is extraordinary, he has overestimated himself and is courting death. The tall and thin middle-aged man stared coldly at Du Xiaofu in rage. His practitioner weapon was destroyed, and he was unable to calm down. Suddenly, he pounced towards Du Xiaofu again. He waved his hand and punched out. The rune energy rushed out like a rainbow and shook the space. Du Xiaoyao, you wastrel. You have eaten the practitioner weapon, so it's time for you to do something. Buy me some time. Looking at the fist that shook the space coming towards him, Du Xiaofu did not pay much attention to it. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and gritted his teeth. He ignored the tall and thin middle-aged man and immediately sat cross-legged on the ground. Hand seals were condensed one after another. With Du Xiaoyao around, Du Xiaofu was not too worried. Du Xiaofu had already seen Du Xiaoyao's strength. She could force a Martial Marquis realm Nirvana realm expert back with one punch and make a Martial Marquis realm Nirvana realm expert suffer. Du Xiaoyao's strength was definitely terrifying and abnormal. All right, leave it to me. Du Xiaoyao's figure appeared like a ghost and blocked in front of the tall and thin middle-aged man. Her small macaque body suddenly turned into a giant ape that was crystal clear. The mysterious runes around her body surged, causing the surrounding space to ripple violently. She punched out in an instant. Boom! With such a collision, the space rumbled like thunder. The energy was violent, and the giant golden ape's figure was shaken back a few steps before stabilizing. Chi! Chi! The tall and thin middle-aged man's figure was shaken back. He looked at the giant golden ape with shock. Suddenly, after the shock, the tall and thin middle-aged man's eyes flashed with coldness. The runes around his body spread and connected with his martial vein, merging into his vein spirit. The tall and thin middle-aged man merged with a giant demon ox shadow. His entire person seemed to have turned into a demon ox shadow. His body merged into the demon ox shadow and was faintly discernible. Moo! The demon ox shadow roared, and its two horns spread dazzling runes. The surrounding space was filled with energy. The shadow glowed and began to emit terrifying fluctuations. Its aura was so oppressive that it made people's souls tremble. However, the demon ox shadow was obviously unable to suppress Du Xiaoyao. Roar! Du Xiaoyao roared. Her eyes were like natural spiritual eyes. She stared at the demon ox shadow fiercely. A dazzling golden light exploded like the sun, and a terrifying aura erupted. It was as if a terrifying lord had come into being. It directly bombarded the demon ox shadow. Boom! Du Xiaoyao's macaque body punched out. The terrifying aura brought about an unparalleled sense of oppression. The two immediately collided. Sand and stones flew around. Large cracks spread on the ground and huge rocks shattered. Du Xiaoyao originally had the upper hand. However, with the tall and thin middle-aged man's all-out attack, it was difficult for her to defeat her opponent. For a moment, the two seemed to be neck and neck. Yi Piaoling and the short and fat middle-aged man were already in midair. They were locked in an intense battle. Terrifying energy swept across and spread, destroying a large area of mountains. Monstrous energy swept across the surroundings. Du Xiaofu sat with his legs crossed. The aura around him was strangely peaceful. However, the aura around Du Xiaofu started to rise. A faint golden light enveloped him like a halo. After a while, Du Xiaofu communicated with the martial vein. The golden talisman engravings on his back spread out, and a wave of pressure descended. That guy, is he preparing to break through now? In midair, Yi Piaoling, who was in the midst of an intense battle, looked at Du Xiaofu from the corner of her eyes. She was shocked. That's right. Du Xiaofu was planning to break through now. With his current cultivation, Du Xiaofu knew that he couldn't do anything to the tall and thin middle-aged man, who was at the Nirvana realm of Martial Lord realm. Facing an expert at the Nirvana realm of Martial Lord realm, Du Xiaofu knew that even if he attacked with all his might and used all his tricks, it would still be useless. The difference in strength was too huge. No matter how strong his tricks were, it would be difficult to close the huge gap. Therefore, he could only try to break through. He should have broken through long ago, but Du Xiaofu forcefully resisted the temptation to break through. He had been stabilizing his foundation, making it as solid as a rock. If it were anyone else, even if they were extremely talented, they wouldn't be able to resist the temptation to break through again and again. It must be known that the feeling brought about by a breakthrough was an almost irresistible temptation for cultivators. However, Du Xiaofu did it. He resisted the temptation to break through again and again. To cultivators, it was simply a form of torture. Although he was stabilizing his foundation and forging himself, it was also a type of training that ordinary people couldn't endure. Du Xiaofu had managed to do it. There was no one to supervise or urge him. He had persevered on his own. Therefore, it was not unreasonable for Du Xiaofu to be invincible among those of the same level. Even in this war realm, he left his name on the list and rushed to the second place in one fell swoop. Everyone had heard of the saying that one could only rise above others after suffering the most hardships. However, how many people in this world could do it themselves? At best, it was rare. At this time, Du Xiaofu also felt that his foundation was more or less stable. It was already time for a breakthrough. This kind of breakthrough didn't require an opportunity or preparation. It could directly break through at any time. This was because Du Xiaofu had long reached the time for a breakthrough. It was also a huge bottleneck to break through from the complete level of the pulsating realm to the initial level of the pulsating realm. There was a huge difference between the pulsating realm and the pulsating realm. The pulsating realm was much stronger than the pulsating realm. Rumble. Behind Du Xiaofu, golden talisman patterns spread. The five-finger mountain peak's pulsating spirit evolved. The talisman patterns arranged themselves and grew. It absorbed the energy of heaven and earth and connected with the martial veins. With unparalleled talent and accumulation, it began to connect the pulsating spirit. Although connecting the pulsating spirit was difficult, and most cultivators would never be able to break through this stage in their entire lives. However, to Du Xiaofu, all he needed was time. The comprehension he gained from Du Xiaoyao's runic space was astonishing. It wasn't too difficult to connect the pulsating spirit. Once the pulsating spirit was connected, and he stepped into the pulsating spirit realm, his strength would naturally increase by leaps and bounds. Stepping into the pulsating spirit realm was not something that the pulsating realm could compare to. The pulsating spirit behind him evolved. Du Xiaofu was waiting for the final step, waiting to step into the pulsating spirit realm. He's really only in the pulsating realm. What kind of pulsating spirit is that? It's so powerful. In the distance, the tall and thin middle-aged man and the short and fat youth who were fighting with Du Xiaoyao and Yi Piaoling also felt the fluctuations coming from Du Xiaofu's body and were shocked. The aura and pressure that spread out from the pulsating spirit was too domineering and too soul-shaking. The tall and short middle-aged man were shocked. There was actually such a talented youth in such a small place. If this were to spread outside, even the large sects would be shocked. Boom! Finally, the pulsating spirit mountain peak behind Du Xiaofu trembled. It absorbed the endless energy of heaven and earth. The talisman patterns surged, as if they had been tempered thousands of times, as if they were alive. They released a dazzling golden light that shone brightly. The endless pressure and aura overflowed the sky. Rumble. Suddenly, for some unknown reason, the earth and the mountain range rumbled, and even the mountain peaks trembled. At this moment, the meridian spirit mountain peak behind Du Xiaofu seemed to connect with the surrounding earth for no reason. It was connected with the surrounding mountains and peaks. Mysterious runes flickered as they connected with the surrounding mountains and earth, as if they were about to merge into one. Inside the mountain range, for some unknown reason, many people appeared in the mountain range recently. They seemed to be searching for something. What's going on over there? Is a treasure about to appear? Could it be over there? Following the shaking of the earth, many people in the mountain range looked over in shock. In the distance, there was a domineering and terrifying aura spreading out. Today's update has been completed. It should be said that it was yesterday's update. It's 5:00 in the morning again. Little U apologizes. Everyone, please bear with it. If you have a recommendation ticket or something, please click on it after reading. Also, please support the original version. Thank you. Chapter 329. Boom. The earth shook and the mountains shook, as if there was an earthquake. Even the sky was trembling. At this moment, the pulse spirit behind Du Xiaofu was growing stronger, its pressure seeming to want to crush the mountain peak. The phantom of the pulse spirit continued to evolve and rearrange itself, finally reaching its peak. Break! Just as the pulse spirit's aura reached its strongest point, Du Xiaofu opened his mouth and softly uttered the word break. Within the divine watchtower, a muffled sound immediately rang out, and his entire body suddenly trembled. Boom! A new and powerful aura suddenly swept out from Du Xiaofu's body. His aura skyrocketed, as if he had become a different person. His aura was incomparably powerful, sweeping through the sky. He had stepped into the initial stage of the pulse spirit realm. Moo! The phantom of the demon ox roared, its horns rippling with runes. It galloped with a clanging sound, and a terrifying force continuously slammed into Du Xiaoyao's ape body. Ayo! Du Xiaoyao roared, its huge body wrapped in golden light, causing the space to rumble. Waves of air surged, as if wanting to turn the heavens and earth upside down. Its energy undulated like the waves of the ocean. It waved its fists, like a rainbow streaking across the sky, and runes surging, continuously resisting the demon ox. The two collided, and large areas of the surrounding mountain peaks were destroyed. Rumbling sounds rang out continuously, and neither could suppress the other. However, after each collision, Du Xiaoyao's aura remained stable, while the demon oxes became more and more hurried. Chilal. In the collision, The two once again separated upon contact. The demon ox's body and Du Xiaoyao's ape body staggered back at the same time. Come, so what if you're a martial marquis? At this moment, Du Xiaofu appeared in the air, his silhouette soaring up into the air as he arrived. After stepping into the pulse spirit realm, Du Xiaofu was truly flying in the air. Behind him, there was a golden mountain pulse spirit several feet in size, and an endless domineering aura swept out. He just broke through to the pulse spirit realm. How can he be so strong? The demon ox's huge eyes were shocked, feeling the terrifying aura of the strange mountain pulse spirit, causing its heart to tremble for no reason. This kid must be killed. Suddenly, dazzling runes spread all over the demon ox's body. Above each of its horns, a rune energy beam shot up to the sky, as if it wanted to pierce through the vast sky and explode towards Du Xiaofu. Suppress. Du Xiaofu shouted and formed a seal with his hands. The golden mountain's vain spirit descended from the sky, suppressing the light beam from the two horns of the demonic bull. Above the vain spirit, the mysterious golden talisman runes unfolded. The runes appeared as if they wanted to suppress all living things. The momentum was terrifying. Boom. The collision caused Du Xiaofu's mountain vein soul to tremble violently, as if it was about to flip it over. Buzz. But then, an overbearing aura burst out from the vein soul of the mountain peak. The mountain peak's shadow suddenly grew to the size of a small mountain. Waves of energy burst out with boundless suppressive power, crushing the rune-light pillars on the horns of the demonic bull. Boom. The huge mountain vein soul's shadow then fell from the sky with the force of a thunderbolt, landing directly on the back of the demon ox. A vast and boundless power swept out, directly crushing the huge body of the demonic bull downwards. The four huge, solid bull hooves were deeply pressed into the rocky ground. Moo! The demonic bull roared. The tall and skinny middle-aged man who was faintly discernible revealed a look of shock. The huge body of the demonic bull emitted dazzling runes, constantly vibrating with divine power as vast as the sea, wanting to shatter Du Xiaofu's phantom. But no matter how hard the demon ox tried, although the huge mountain's shadow shook, it could not be shaken at all. What a powerful great meridian soul! You've obtained 30% of my true inheritance. Now it's my turn. Looking at Du Xiaofu using his pulse soul to suppress the demon ox phantom on the tall and skinny middle-aged man, little demon Du suddenly let out a soft shout. Her sparkling and translucent body was wrapped in multicolored light, and talisman runes spread out. Roar! Du Xiaoyao's ape body roared and appeared in front of the suppressed demon ox shadow. A terrifying aura burst out, and she suddenly punched out. Boom! This punch was wrapped in a hazy radiance, as if the world had just been created. Around the fist, the space was blurred and distorted, as if it could push in all directions and suppress everything. It contained an inexplicable pressure that could burst the soul and make the soul throb. Boom! Du Xiaoyao's fist rapidly enlarged in the pupils of the demon ox shadow, and then it blasted between the two horns' eyebrows. Suddenly, the sound waves were sonorous and deafening, and the runes and energy spread out in all directions. Du Xiaoyao's punch was even able to resonate with the mountain vein soul that Du Xiaofu had activated. The two were connected, creating a chain reaction, complementing each other, and the power increased unexpectedly. Walala! The tall and thin middle-aged man's eyes were filled with horror. The demon ox shadow's body began to explode, and it was destroyed directly. Puff, puff, puff. Large mouthfuls of blood spurted out from the tall and thin middle-aged man's mouth. His face was deathly pale, and his eyes were filled with fear. The broken runes spread out, and a huge mountain nearby was destroyed. The mountain vein soul disappeared, and it turned into a sky full of bright golden runes and mysterious runes, and returned to Du Xiaofu's body. Qi. At the same time, Du Xiaofu appeared in the sky, and his figure was like a god. He directly swooped down like a ghost and appeared in front of the tall and thin middle-aged man. Die. The pale golden light was dazzling, and Du Xiaofu swooped down like a golden-winged rock. His fist was wrapped in pale golden runes, and it carried the domineering will of the golden-winged rock. His fist landed on the tall and thin middle-aged man's chest with a loud bang. How can he be so strong? Could there be a talent in this small place? My life is over. The tall and thin middle-aged man's pupil shrank, and his fist grew bigger and bigger. At this moment, his eyes were filled with despair and shock. A young man who had just broken through to the pulse spirit realm had such strength. This was a talent. Bam! Du Xiaofu's fist landed, and the tall and thin middle-aged man's last defense was destroyed. The pale golden runes surged into his body like a flash flood. Puff! The tall and thin young man's body was directly sent flying, and a fist-sized bloody hole appeared in his chest. Blood spurted out, and his internal organs were shattered. After he fell to the ground, his vitality was destroyed, and he died on the spot. Floating sky suppression. At the same time, in the sky not far away, Yi Piaoling's Xian Qi burst out, and waves of black energy suddenly spread out. Each wave was fiercer than the last, and the momentum was surging, as if it could suppress everything. It was so terrifying. Woo! At this moment, the short and fat middle-aged man had already connected with his martial vein. He merged with a huge crimson demonic eagle phantom, and a terrifying airwave burst out from its wings. However, under the suppression of Yi Piaoling's attack, the crimson demonic eagle phantom was firmly suppressed by waves of energy like the waves of the sea. Whoosh! Whoosh! For a moment, no matter how the demonic eagle phantom flapped its wings and turned the sky upside down, it was blocked and suppressed by the overwhelming momentum. It was unable to destroy the vast attack. At the same time, the serene python in Yi Piaoling's hand burst out a bright light, and the pale black Xian Qi on her body poured into the serene python in her hand, causing the serene python to hum like the wind and thunder. As the vast Xian Qi poured in, a liquid-like rune energy suddenly flowed and spread on the serene python. An extremely terrifying energy was released, and the rune dazzled and swept out. In an instant, under the surprised gazes of Du Xiaofu and Du Xiaoyao, who had just raised their heads, it condensed into a huge serene rune python that was dozens of feet long. Hiss! Hiss! This huge python was like a sword and a beast. The runes were monstrous, and its aura was shocking, causing people to tremble in fear. Serene python sword art. Yi Piaoling suddenly spat out a low and fierce shout. Her eyes suddenly became sharp, and the serene python's sword light swept out, and a terrifying aura burst out like a flood. Chilala. In an instant, wherever the serene python passed, the space was distorted, and a dazzling sword light swept out, bringing with it an extremely sharp and ear-piercing sound as it broke through the space like thunder. At this moment, facing such a majestic and fierce attack, the demonic eagle's eyes were covered by the serene rune python that swept over. The pupils of the short and fat middle-aged man contracted, and fear spread. Chilala. The serene python destroyed everything, and the demonic eagle's shadow collapsed inch by inch like fireworks. The short and fat middle-aged man's figure appeared, and blood kept pouring out of his mouth in the air. Swish! Swish! Yi Piaoling's figure swept over like lightning, and the sharp light in her eyes swept across the sky. The serene python in her hand burst out a dazzling sword light, and directly pierced through the middle-aged man's chest. The sect won't. Before the short and fat middle-aged man could finish his words, his eyes were closed in fear, and his vitality had been destroyed. His body fell from the sky, and there was no more vitality left. What a powerful attack! That sword's aura is so strong. Du Xiaofu raised his head and looked at the sky. The power of that sword was extraordinary, and it was definitely a precious treasure. It looks delicious, but I'm afraid it will get stuck in my teeth. Du Xiaoyao returned to her little monkey form and also landed on Du Xiaofu's shoulder. Looking at the spiritual python in Yi Piaoling's hand, she was almost drooling. However, her pale golden eyes were filled with worry, as if she was afraid that she would not be able to swallow that sword. Yi Piaoling landed on the ground, and her face was already as pale as ash. She spat out a mouthful of blood, and immediately said to Du Xiaofu and Du Xiaoyao, "Many people are coming. Let's leave first." After hurriedly cleaning up, Yi Piaoling destroyed all the corpses on the ground, and the two of them left in a hurry. Swish, swish. Just a moment after the two of them left, the sound of wind breaking resounded. Many figures appeared in the surroundings, and they were all approaching carefully. It's a fight between experts. With such destructive power, I'm afraid that there are at least a few martial lords at the Nirvana realm and above fighting intensely. Be careful. Don't provoke those experts. Many figures appeared, and they looked at the destroyed mountains around them. They felt that there were still many shocking auras spreading in the space, and they were all shocked. Another 3 days passed. Within this mountain range, many experts appeared. There were quite a number of martial marquee realm cultivators. Chapter 330. These people seem to have come in search of something. Their arrival startled the surrounding mountains, causing the birds to flee and the beasts to lay dormant. Mountain streams, valleys, steep cliffs, dense forests. Everyone was searching everywhere, attracted by the shocking commotion a few days ago. However, that commotion never appeared again. This caused everyone to fall into a state of confusion, and they did not know where to begin their search. Is the legend true? Is there really a cave dwelling of an expert hidden within the dark forest? It should be true. A few days ago, multicolored light soared into the sky and the earth shook. That should be the cave dwelling of the hidden expert appearing. Rumor has it that the expert is extremely powerful, and that there are precious treasures and divine weapons in the cave dwelling. Within the dense forests of the mountain range, groups of 3 to 5 people were discussing. Everyone who came after receiving the news was filled with yearning. Everyone wanted to obtain the treasure. No one forgot to be on guard. This was also within the dark forest. Once there were more people, there would naturally be endless disputes. Occasionally, after a few words, people would come to blows. The large mountain range gradually became more chaotic and also more lively. At dusk, the afterglow of the setting sun shrouded the land. Gradually, night fell. Boom. Suddenly, in the depths of the mountain range, the earth shook again. Multicolored light soared into the sky, and an aura spread across the sky. Within the spreading aura, there was a faint trace of a terrifying aura spreading. This aura was like the awakening of a ferocious beast, causing the birds and beasts in the surrounding mountains to go into hibernation, causing the cultivators to feel fear and their souls to tremble. What a terrifying aura! That terrifying aura spread, causing everyone to feel fear and trepidation. However, everything disappeared without a trace. It's in front, not far away. In the surrounding mountains, countless figures flew out, following the direction of that multicolored light. They were afraid that if they were a step too slow, the treasure would be taken by someone else first. Early in the morning, the sky separated from the night sky. In the mountains and forests, all living things awakened. Who? Within the cave, Du Xiaofu sat cross-legged. The faint golden aura around him retracted into his body. He opened his eyes, the faint golden light in his eyes flickering like golden lightning. Then, it was retracted, and his eyes regained their clarity. Boom! A vigorous aura spread out from his body, causing the surrounding space to tremble. Then, it gradually calmed down. I've finally reached the pulse spirit realm, Du Xiaofu muttered with a smile. Feeling the abundant, profound qi in his body and the strengthening of his physical strength, his entire body felt indescribably comfortable, and he wished he could roar a few times. After a few days of breathing, his cultivation of the initial level of the pulse spirit realm had completely stabilized. This guy is also cultivating? Du Xiaofu then looked at Du Xiaoyao, who was wrapped in golden light, with a curious gaze. Perhaps it was because she had swallowed a practitioner weapon, but Du Xiaoyao was also obediently cultivating. After a while, Du Xiaofu slowly got up and walked out of the cave so as not to disturb Du Xiaoyao's cultivation. Outside the cave, at the peak of the mountain, the morning sun shone. Du Xiaofu stood there quietly. The morning breeze blew, and a few strands of his long black hair danced around his ears. From time to time, the ends of his hair brushed past his resolute face. I wonder where father is now, and when will I be able to see mother and sister? His purple robe fluttering slightly, Du Xiaofu looked at the vast forest and continuous mountain peaks in front of him. His brows were slightly furrowed, and his eyes were filled with anticipation. I didn't expect you to have such a sentimental side. A faint voice sounded. When the last word of the voice fell, a black-robed youth appeared beside Du Xiaofu. The black-robed youth looked in the direction Du Xiaofu was looking. Under the scattered bangs on his forehead, there was an innate piercing sharpness in his eyes. Then, he turned slightly to look at Du Xiaofu. His thin lips parted slightly, and he said, "Thank you very much this time. I owe you another one." The black-robed youth was Yi Piaoling. At this moment, his faint voice was no longer indifferent, and there was some gentleness in his piercing sharp eyes. "You're welcome. I just helped when I saw injustice." Du Xiaofu smiled. His tightened eyebrows relaxed, and a smile appeared on his face. "Those people are not to be trifled with. You've already gotten yourself into big trouble." Yi Piaoling smiled. He had a high-nose bridge, and his thin lips were slightly arrogant. His temperament was extraordinary, but it made people not dare to approach him. He was like an eagle in the night, proud and aloof. How are they compared to the Dark Nether sect? Du Xiaofu looked at Yi Piaoling and asked. Yi Piaoling looked slightly at Du Xiaofu for a while, and said, "They should be much more difficult to deal with than the Dark Nether sect. How about the Divine Light Court?" Du Xiaofu blinked and continued to ask. Yi Piaoling looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "They're a little bit worse. The Divine Light Court should be more difficult to deal with." "Haha, what's there to be afraid of? I've already killed a scarlet cloud dragon of the Divine Light Court, and I've also beaten a kid with a spiritual vein body half to death. Do you think I'm afraid of this little trouble?" Du Xiaofu immediately laughed. He looked at Yi Piaoling and said, "As the saying goes, when there's too much debt, there's no need to worry. When there's too much trouble, there's no need to be afraid." "You win." Yi Piaoling looked helplessly at Du Xiaofu, not knowing what to say. Then, he frowned and looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "Why don't you ask why those guys are chasing after me? I didn't help you because of them. I helped you because I like your temperament. Who cares why they're chasing after you? There's no need to ask. Besides, it's not a good thing to be chased after. You just said that those people are difficult to deal with. Even if I ask, I won't be able to avenge you. Why should I ask?" Du Xiaofu said, "Thank you." Yi Piaoling looked at Du Xiaofu, and his eyes flickered. Then, he said two simple words. Du Xiaofu smiled and felt the aura on Yi Piaoling's body. He was a little surprised and said, "You've recovered quite quickly from such a serious injury. It's not a big deal. I'll probably recover in a few days," Yi Piaoling said. "There's something wrong with your body." Du Xiaofu felt the aura on Yi Piaoling's body and frowned. He used his spiritual energy to check Yi Piaoling's body. He found that although Yi Piaoling's injuries had recovered, the qi in his body was quite chaotic. He had noticed this chaotic aura last time in the Dark City. "I was hit by my enemy's red killing palm. It's a vicious cultivation method. It's said that people who are hit by the red killing palm are basically incurable. I relied on some methods to survive." Yi Piaoling didn't hide anything and said, "I came to the dark forest because I heard that the king of medicine was living in seclusion there. So, I wanted to try my luck and find him. Unfortunately, I haven't found him yet." "You're also here to find that guy?" Du Xiaofu couldn't help but smile bitterly. It was extremely difficult for others to find the king of medicine. However, he often saw that old man even though he didn't want to. "You know the king of medicine?" Yi Piaoling looked at Du Xiaofu and trembled. "I've only seen him. I don't know him, but I don't know where he is now. If there's a chance in the future, you can go to a pharmacy called the Medicine Hut in Dark Forest Town to try your luck," Du Xiaofu said. "I've been there. I got the news that it was the Medicine Hut in Dark Forest Town. But when I got there, the Medicine Hut had already been burned down." Yi Piaoling sighed and then calmed down and said, "I think this is fate. I'm destined to die." Du Xiaofu smiled and looked at Yi Piaoling and said, "Don't be so depressed. Maybe there's still a chance. There are many medicine talisman masters in the world." "Maybe," Yi Piaoling said softly. Looking at Du Xiaofu, he felt very comfortable. He had never gotten along so well with someone of the same generation. Since he was young, he had lived in oppression and competition. Everyone around him was his competitor. He didn't have any time to relax. However, despite his efforts, he still ended up like this. He was forced to escape from the sect and was hunted down by the sect. He was also hit by the red killing palm. He didn't know how long he could live. After a while, Yi Piaoling looked at Du Xiaofu with some curiosity and said, "Did you really beat up a person with the spiritual pulse from the Divine Light Court?" "Yes, but I had some scruples. I didn't dare to kill him, but he should be half dead," Du Xiaofu said softly. He couldn't help but feel a little regretful. He didn't like the feeling of having scruples. A real man should be free and unrestrained. Hearing this, Yi Piaoling looked at Du Xiaofu with some shock. He naturally knew how terrifying a person with the spiritual pulse was. But then, Yi Piaoling sighed. His talent wasn't inferior to a person with the spiritual pulse before. It was a pity that he met with misfortune. "How strong is the Divine Light Court?" Du Xiaofu looked up and asked Yi Piaoling. "Very strong. They control several empires and have many experts. There are even many martial lords. It's rumored that the Divine Light Court has a martial venerable." Yi Piaoling told Du Xiaofu everything he knew. "Martial venerable? What level is that?" Hearing the two words martial exalted, Du Xiaofu's heart involuntarily trembled. It was as if he had resonated with something. Those two simple words seemed to have an invisible might towards cultivators. "You know very little. It's no wonder. After all, this is a small place. You don't know too much." Yi Piaoling looked at Du Xiaofu and smiled. He said, "You are now in the spiritual pulse realm. After the spiritual pulse realm, you can enter the martial lord realm by merging with the spiritual pulse spirit. Only then can you barely walk outside. After the martial lord realm, the spiritual pulse spirit is broken and merged with the body. Only then can you be called a king. After the martial king realm, the martial pulse spirit covers the mortal body. The martial pulse spirit and the physical body merge. The spiritual pulse spirit guards the palace. Those who succeed will soar to the sky in one step and become a martial emperor. When a martial emperor is angry, he can move mountains and seas and leave corpses everywhere. If you fail, your cultivation will be scattered. In the worst case, you will be turned into ashes. It's amazing for an empire to have a martial emperor. Today's update is fast. Little you, continue to work hard. The flowers are now 159. Brothers, please drop 200. Little you will continue to write. Chapter 331. Translator. H2DH2 Mr. Yi Piaoling's eyes were filled with yearning. Martial King and Martial Emperor were his goals. Unfortunately, he did not know if he would have the time to do so now. After the Martial Emperor realm is the Martial Honorable realm. It is rumored that the strongest person in the Divine Light Court has already reached the Martial Honorable realm. His honorable realm has allowed the Divine Light Court to remain strong. Yi Piaoling paused for a while, then continued to speak softly to Du Xiaofu. Martial King, Martial Emperor, Martial Honorable Realm. Du Xiaofu's heart was filled with yearning as he listened. In comparison, his current Meridian Spirit realm was far too weak. After a while, Du Xiaofu continued to look at Yi Piaoling and asked, "What about after the Martial Honorable Realm?" Yi Piaoling shook his head and said, "After the Martial Honorable Realm, I'm not too sure. I've only heard some rumors. However, there is no end to cultivation, and there is no end to the martial path. After the Martial Honorable Realm, there are naturally more powerful levels. However, with our current cultivation, we are still unable to come into contact with that wider world," Yi Piaoling said softly. His piercingly sharp eyes were filled with anticipation, but they were also filled with sadness. There is no end to cultivation, there is no end to the martial path, and there is no end to the strong, Du Xiaofu muttered softly, as if he had understood something. "You should go out. With your talent, you shouldn't stay in this corner. Although the dark forest is not small, compared to the entire continent, it is only a remote corner. This place is too small. In the long run, you will be confined here," Yi Piaoling said seriously to Du Xiaofu. "How big is the outside world?" Du Xiaofu also asked Yi Piaoling seriously. "It's very big. The dark forest is the closest to the Stone Dragon Empire. It's also connected to a few other empires. Each empire has many prefectures and countless cities. but compared to a continent, it's just a small and remote place. Yi Piaoling stared at Du Xiaofu and slowly took a few steps forward. His black robe and long hair fluttered as he stood with his hands behind his back. He gazed at the sky ahead and said, "Rumor has it that we are in the central continent. Countless sects and clans have appeared in the central continent. There are even great sects and powerful clans that are above the imperial power. Whether it was the Stone Dragon Empire or the Dark Forest, they were both in a corner. The center of the Central Plains is the true world of cultivation. It is the holy land for us cultivators." That place was filled with heroes. There were many outstanding individuals, and there were endless streams of people. There were powerful demonic beasts with powerful bloodlines, and there were rare and terrifying demonic spirits that looked down on the world. Each and every one of them was peerless in their generation, and their names shook the world. Even though the strong are respected there and the weak are prey to the strong, that place still represents the pinnacle of cultivators. Compared to the Dark Forest and the Stone Dragon Empire, this place is too small. Yi Piaoling's eyes slightly trembled after hearing this. In the past, he also wanted to go to the central continent. That was the place he wanted to go. But now, Yi Piaoling knew that he didn't have a chance. At this moment, Du Xiaofu was also shaken. His mind was shaken. No one had ever told him about this before. No one had ever told him that the outside world was so big. Martial kings, martial kings, martial saints. Above the central continent, there were numerous countries. That place represented the pinnacle of cultivators. That place was filled with heroes and geniuses. There were endless streams of powerful demonic beasts and terrifying demonic spirits that looked down on the world. Their talents were peerless and their names shook the world. Yi Piaoling's words echoed in Du Xiaofu's mind. At this moment, a majestic map appeared in his mind. It was a gigantic world. His blood was boiling. He wanted to go there immediately and compete with the heroes there. He wanted to see if he could stand at the top of the central continent. "Do you want to become a real expert?" Yi Piaoling looked at Du Xiaofu and asked. Du Xiaofu's eyes fluctuated. There was a faint golden light in them. He slightly nodded and said, "Of course. The weak are prey to the strong. I don't bully others, but I don't want to be bullied by others." "Then you should leave this place as soon as possible. If this place is too small, it will restrict you." As Yi Piaoling spoke, he slowly clenched his fists within the sleeves of his black robe. His body slightly trembled and sharpness flickered in his eyes. He said, "As cultivators, once we step onto the path of cultivation, we have already chosen to follow the law of the jungle. Strength is everything. If you are weak, you can only be bullied by others. You are meat on the chopping block. If you're weak, you don't even have the right to live. You don't even have the right to decide your own life." Crippled Martial Vane, a fool's name. Parents forced to separate, brother and sister I haven't seen. Du Xiaofu looked at the sky and thought of the past. Scene after scene appeared in his mind. In the Dark Forest, he was chased by the Black Fiend sect like a stray dog. Not long ago, he was chased by the Dark Nether sect. He was forced to flee by the powerful people of Dark City. He could only flee. If you're weak, you can only be bullied by others. You don't even have the right to decide your own life. If you're weak, you don't even have the right to live. You don't even have the right to decide your own life. Yi Piaoling's words trembled in Du Xiaofu's mind. It was like a sudden clap of thunder, causing his soul to tremble. "I want to become strong. I want my parents to be together. I want my brother and sister to be reunited. I want to become strong. I want to become strong. I want to become strong. If people don't offend me, I won't offend them. If people offend me, I will retaliate. Even if I'm far away, I will kill them." Du Xiaofu looked at the sky with golden light flickering in his eyes. He clenched his fists tightly. He firmly believed that he must become strong as soon as possible. In a world where strength was everything, the strong preyed on the weak. Becoming strong was the only way to survive. If one obeyed, one would be ordinary. If one defied, one would be strong. The sun was setting in the west. Thick clouds and mist occupied the sky. The setting sun took advantage of the gaps and shot out rays of crimson light. In the vast sea of trees, golden rays of light were rolling. Du Xiaoyao was still cultivating, and Du Xiaofu couldn't leave. Therefore, he set up a seal at the entrance of the cave. In any case, Du Xiaofu was a 4-star spirit talisman master. Setting up some seals was definitely not a difficult task for him. Then, Du Xiaofu found a small cave nearby and entered it. He also set up a seal at the entrance of the cave. Work hard to become stronger. Speed up the process of becoming stronger. After everything was ready, Du Xiaofu sat cross-legged in the cave and muttered to himself. Yi Piaoling's words during the day shocked Du Xiaofu greatly. It also opened up a new world in Du Xiaofu's heart. A new picture unfolded in front of Du Xiaofu, and Du Xiaofu knew that he had to work hard to become stronger in order to achieve all of this. Jin Xingshun had said that the Xiantian realm and the Pulse realm were the most important stages in building a good foundation. One couldn't be impatient. Otherwise, it would be too late to regret it. But now, Du Xiaofu had already stepped into the Pulse spirit realm. Although it was still very important to stabilize one's cultivation and build a good foundation, compared to the Xiantian realm and the Pulse realm, he had to pay less attention to his foundation. After all, his foundation had been established and he could start to break through. Du Xiaoyao was still cultivating. Since she couldn't leave, Du Xiaofu didn't want to waste time. He planned to first cultivate the second stage of the Golden Rocks body tempering technique, bone washing and marrow cleansing. The first stage of the Golden Rocks body tempering technique was to temper the golden feathers. It required spiritual herbs to temper the body. The second stage of bone washing and marrow cleansing required consuming the blood essence of demonic beasts on the heavenly beast ranking. The blood essence contained the most violent energy to wash the bones and marrow. The higher the level of the demonic beast, the more effective its blood essence would be for bone washing and marrow cleansing. Ordinary demonic beasts wouldn't be very effective. It had been a long time since he had obtained the blood of the scarlet cloud flood dragon, but Du Xiaofu hadn't had the time to cultivate. And now, Du Xiaofu planned to use the time he had to start cultivating the second stage of the body tempering technique, bone washing and marrow cleansing. Although he had the blood of the scarlet cloud flood dragon in his hands, the first thing Du Xiaofu needed to do was to refine the flood dragon's blood into true essence blood. There was a lot of blood in an entire flood dragon. Although Du Xiaofu practiced the cultivation method of the golden-winged great rocks, he still had a human body. It was impossible for him to swallow an entire flood dragon's blood. Du Xiaofu cultivated the golden rocks body tempering technique, but he wasn't a golden rock. He could only refine the blood into the purest form of blood essence and refine all the impurities. Finally, he would consume the purest scarlet cloud flood dragon's blood essence to cultivate the body tempering technique. The effect of this was definitely not inferior to swallowing an entire scarlet cloud flood dragon's blood essence. It might even surpass it. It could only be stronger. Chila. With a shake of his long sleeve, Du Xiaofu's body appeared in a row of uneven bottles of different sizes. Faintly, a frantic force spread out from them. Inside them was the scarlet cloud flood dragon's blood. Then, Du Xiaofu condensed a handprint in his hand. Suddenly, white light enveloped his body like divine light. An extremely ancient aura surged out from his body. Then, many dazzling runes surged out in front of him. Finally, these dazzling runes rapidly converged, before directly condensing into a spiritual stove symbol cauldron filled with white, green, black, scarlet, and yellow energy. Bang! Above the spiritual stove and talisman cauldron, a faint golden radiance appeared, and a blazing aura spread out. The mysterious patterns on the talisman flickered incessantly, and a powerful aura surged out like a wave, shaking the whole cave. Walala! Inside the spiritual stove symbol cauldron, flames jumped, and the hand seals in Du Xiaofu's hand started to condense and change. Then, with a wave of his hand, a white divine radiance wrapped around many bottles and jars. Blood with frantic fluctuations of energy was immediately poured into the spiritual stove symbol cauldron. Eowel, when the scarlet cloud flood dragon's blood was poured into the spiritual stove symbol cauldron, it came in contact with the blazing flames. The fluctuations of energy immediately intensified, as if a flood dragon's roar was faintly heard. Today's update is complete. I can finally finish the update earlier. Chapter 332. At the same time, Du Xiaofu's hand seals changed, controlling the fluctuations of the 5 elemental symbols inside the spiritual stove symbol cauldron. A blazing aura immediately whizzed out, wrapping around the blood of the scarlet cloud flood dragon and starting to refine it. All impurities had to be refined, leaving behind the purest blood essence and finally cleansing the bones. Time slowly passed, and this refining process was extremely exhausting for Du Xiaofu. His mental energy had to sense the changes inside the spiritual stove symbol cauldron, including the changes in temperature and the flood dragon's blood. Du Xiaofu didn't dare relax even for the slightest change. Although this wasn't refining medicine, the slightest mistake could lead to the destruction of this precious flood dragon's blood. In any case, he was now a talisman master of the 4 stars, and his mental capacity had increased by quite a lot. After Du Xiaofu persevered for 14 to 14 hours, an extremely pure energy started to fluctuate inside the spiritual stove. Ao. Inside the spiritual stove symbol cauldron, runes started to move and multicolored light spread out. At this moment, the flood dragon's blood had already reached its purest state, and the boundless energy it contained was also at its peak. Not long after, a flood dragon's roar could be heard, shaking the soul. Rumble. The spiritual stove symbol cauldron swayed, as if a flood dragon was surging inside, wanting to destroy Du Xiaofu's spiritual stove symbol cauldron. The essence blood of a demonic beast contained the energy of a demonic beast. To humans hunting demonic beasts, aside from secret bones, the most important treasure was the essence blood contained in their blood. Although it was common knowledge that the most powerful secret techniques and beast energy of demonic beasts were hidden inside their secret bones, there was still a certain amount of essence blood contained within. However, blood would still contain some of it. If one could obtain it, it would be priceless. The stronger the demonic beast, the more precious its essence blood was. The blood of demonic beasts of the highest grade was a treasure among treasures, much more precious than those heavenly treasures. Rumble. Finally, inside the spiritual stove symbol cauldron, the roar reached its peak, and after a violent hissing sound, a dazzling radiance rushed out of the cauldron, illuminating the entire cave. The radiance was dazzling, as if a flood dragon had come back to life. Ao. Inside the spiritual stove symbol cauldron, a dazzling radiance soared to the sky, filling the whole cave with dazzling runes before transforming into a profound cloud scarlet flood dragon. This scarlet cloud flood dragon was several zhang in size, ferocious, as if it was alive. Its flood dragon eyes stared at Du Xiaofu, as if it wanted to tear Du Xiaofu to shreds for revenge. A terrifying pressure spread out from the demonic flood dragon's body. Its aura was not any weaker than its original body when it was alive. It was soul-shaking and intimidating, causing people to tremble with fear. If I could slap you to death when you were alive, why are you still so arrogant when you're dead? Du Xiaofu made his move. Forming hand seals, one of his hands was covered with golden-colored talisman runes. Layer upon layer, densely packed, domineering and fierce. His hand slapped towards the scarlet cloud flood dragon's phantom, like a golden-winged rock spreading its wings. Holala! The scarlet cloud flood dragon's phantom was immediately smashed to pieces by Du Xiaofu's hand, turning into resplendent blood, which once again fell into the spiritual stove symbol cauldron. Inside the spiritual stove symbol cauldron, dazzling runes spread out, and resplendent multicolored light erupted like a sun. Start! Suddenly, Du Xiaofu opened his mouth and took a deep breath. Along with the condensing of his hand seals, a resplendent blood essence liquid was sucked directly into Du Xiaofu's mouth, accompanied by thousands of multicolored glows, just like a resplendent pillar of light. This was the purest blood essence of the scarlet cloud flood dragon, which seemed to contain the most terrifying surging energy, enveloping Du Xiaofu in an incomparably resplendent radiance. Eoo! As the blood essence was sucked into Du Xiaofu's mouth, the roars of a flood dragon could be faintly heard from Du Xiaofu's throat. Creak! As the blood essence of the scarlet cloud flood dragon was swallowed into Du Xiaofu's stomach, the spiritual stove symbol cauldron dissipated into runes, and the profound mysteries returned to his body. Immediately, Du Xiaofu's complexion turned red, as the blood essence of the scarlet cloud flood dragon rushed into his body. That boundless berserk energy collided inside Du Xiaofu's body, spreading to his internal organs, penetrating his bones, muscles, and cells, causing Du Xiaofu's face to immediately turn red. That boundless energy was like a myriad of beasts surging inside his body, wanting to completely destroy Du Xiaofu's body. The berserk energy rushed out, wanting to tear Du Xiaofu's body to shreds. And this was only Du Xiaofu's case. If it were any other cultivator at the initial stage of the spiritual pulse stage, directly swallowing the blood essence of the scarlet cloud flood dragon, they would probably explode and die on the spot. Pain, intense pain, as if his body was about to be torn to shreds. Even with Du Xiaofu's endurance, he found it hard to bear and couldn't help but cry out. It seemed that crying out would at least make him feel a bit better. The intense pain, as if his body was about to be torn to shreds, made Du Xiaofu suffer unspeakably. But Du Xiaofu only let out a few miserable cries before Du Xiaofu forcibly endured it. Now was not the time to scream. The purpose of taking that berserk blood essence was to cultivate the second layer of the body refining technique, bone cleansing and marrow cleansing. Now, he needed the berserk energy contained in the blood essence of the demonic beasts on the heavenly beast list to have the desired effect. Condensing his hand seals, Du Xiaofu started to cultivate the second layer of the body refining technique, bone cleansing and marrow cleansing, using his profound energy to guide the berserk blood essence in his body to cleanse his bones and marrow, making his body even more powerful. Using his profound energy to guide the blood essence to cleanse his bones and marrow, the intense pain in his body made Du Xiaofu's forehead drip with cold sweat, but he forcefully endured it and didn't utter a single sound. Within Du Xiaofu's body, light gradually spread out from within. Resplendent light, runes flickered, complex and profound. The runes sparkled, constantly changing, and finally turned into the image of a profound cloud scarlet dragon, faintly enveloping Du Xiaofu. The Xinyun scarlet flood dragon's shadow circled around Du Xiaofu from head to toe. Ao! The dragon head roared, malevolent and ferocious, as if it wanted to tear Du Xiaofu to shreds. Roar, roar, woo, woo. Within the surrounding mountains, beasts roared incessantly, and countless ferocious birds and beasts rushed out from within the mountains. There seemed to be a murderous aura spreading in the depths of the forest, causing the birds and beasts to stay away, not daring to approach. Countless people surged into the depths of the forest, all of them looking for the cave of the expert. It was said that there were countless treasures in the cave of the expert, including precious treasures and divine weapons. It's said that someone saw the seal just ahead, but those who entered were all dead, killed by the seal. They were all at the spiritual pulse realm. I heard that someone saw a puppet, a very high-level puppet. It could kill spiritual pulse realm experts as if it was nothing, and even martial lords wouldn't dare to fight against it. It can't be. A puppet is so rare. How could it appear here so casually? The rumor must be true. There is a cave of the expert in the dark forest, and I saw the experts of the Twin Hatred sect coming. I also saw Fort Master Mu of the Mu family fort. It's said that they are super experts at the Martial King realm. If they come, I'm afraid we won't be able to get the treasures, even if there is one. That's not it. Treasures have always been obtained by those who are fated, and it has nothing to do with strength. It's just that the stronger the strength, the more competitive it is. In the chaotic mountain range, people were discussing everywhere, and there were disputes from time to time, which attracted more and more people to gather. Now, almost all of the adventurers in the dark forest had arrived. On a mountain peak, the peak was shrouded in clouds, and dozens of figures were looking ahead, their auras sharp and vigorous. They were the fort master of the Mu family fort, Mu Mingqing, and the other experts of the Mu family fort. The seal should be broken soon. The weapon-revered cave is indeed in the dark forest. Mu Mingqing looked at the mountain stream in front of him, where a murderous aura spread out, and his eyes were filled with yearning and passion. Father, is the weapon-revered cave real? Mu Zhenghao asked Mu Mingqing from behind. Mu Mingqing turned slightly to look at Mu Zhenghao and said, "Now it seems to be real. The weapon-revered cave is hidden in the dark forest, and the legend that has been passed down for thousands of years is not groundless. After a pause, Mu Mingqing continued, but there are not many people who still remember this legend. It is said that many of the top experts of the big sects in the central region have come to the dark forest to search, but they have searched for dozens of years and found nothing. Therefore, for thousands of years, the legend has been forgotten, and those who heard the legend did not take it seriously. But now, it seems to be true. Brother, Hintian, Wan Sampang, Shui Tianqiu, and the others are all here. Many people who have been hiding their names can't sit still. It seems that there will be a fight this time. Lu Linchao said to Mu Mingqing. The weapon-revered cave is no small matter, and no one can resist it. Of course, they will come back. I hope the news hasn't spread yet, otherwise, I'm afraid that those horrible masters in the central region will enter the dark forest again. At that time, the dark forest will be a disaster. Mu Mingqing frowned and couldn't help but be a little worried. Clouds and mist spread, and on the protruding rocks of the cliff, a fierce murderous aura spread out, making the surrounding beasts and birds not dare to come close. Feeling this murderous aura, no adventurers dared to come close. On the rocks, many experts of the Black Devil sect stood. If Du Xiaofu was here, he would definitely recognize many of them. Father, is the weapon-revered cave real? Shui Yiming asked Shui Tianqiu, who was standing at the front. Looking at the situation now, of course it is real. Shui Tianqiu nodded, looking forward, his eyes surging with yearning and expectation. Who is the weapon-revered cave? Why haven't I heard of it? Shui Yiming asked his father, Shui Tianqiu. In the book review section, I saw that some readers were discussing yesterday's chapter, I Am Steel. Some readers felt that it was too lame, but some readers thought that it was indispensable, and it was a rare good chapter. Little you will not express any opinions here. What I want to say is that it is enough to see my brothers discussing the plot. Today's first update is here. Little you will continue to write, continue to ask for flowers, ask for anything, and thank my brothers. Chapter 333. Translator. H2DH2 Mr. The revered weapon was an expert who made his name 1,000 years ago. He was an outstanding existence among the weapon talisman masters and was famous throughout the central region for his weapon forging. Rumor has it that the revered weapon suddenly disappeared more than 1,000 years ago. Later, there was another rumor that the revered weapon died because he failed to forge a divine weapon. It is very likely that the revered weapon ended up in the dark forest. It is said that the revered weapon was an expert who walked out of the dark forest. The place he chose to die was most likely the dark forest. At that time, countless experts flocked to the central region to search for the revered weapon's final resting place, hoping to obtain the revered weapon's lifetime treasure and even his inheritance. However, countless experts searched the dark forest for decades and centuries, but they did not find any trace of the revered weapon's cave. Later, this legend gradually faded. Shui Tianqiu said, "If we can obtain the revered weapon's treasure, then our Black Fiend sect will be able to control the dark forest." Shui Yuming's eyes were blazing. As the young master of the Black Fiend sect, if the Black Fiend sect could control the entire dark forest, then he would be able to do whatever he wanted in the dark forest. Your vision is still too shallow, Shui Tianqiu said to Shui Yuming. The revered weapon was an expert whose strength shook the entire central region. The revered weapon was the top weapon talisman master in the entire central region. If we can obtain his treasure, not only will we be able to control the dark forest, it will also be enough for our Black Fiend sect to occupy a place in the central region. Rumble. Just as Shui Tianqiu's voice fell, a large mountain in front of them suddenly trembled. Huge rocks rolled down, the earth shook, and multicolored light shot up into the sky, covering the sun. Whoosh! Under countless gazes from all directions, within the multicolored light that covered the sky, an unfamiliar mountain range suddenly appeared out of thin air, directly appearing in the space in front of them. Within the multicolored light, within the mountain range, there were continuous peaks, but everywhere was barren. Not a single blade of grass grew within the mountain range, exuding a ferocious aura. That's the seal. The seal has appeared. Suddenly, from all directions, there were people exclaiming. The seal had been opened, and within the seal, there must be a treasure. Whoosh! Everyone couldn't bear it any longer. Numerous silhouettes soared through the air, flying towards that unfamiliar place. Everyone wanted to obtain the treasures. That was their true purpose for coming here. Hurry up and snatch the treasure. We can't let others beat us to it. When the remaining people saw that there were people fighting to be the first to enter, some of them originally planned to endure it for a while. However, when they saw the densely packed figures entering the sealed land to seize the treasures, they could not stand it anymore. Many experts soared into the sky and swarmed in. There are spiritual weapons. There are 3 spiritual weapons on that rock. When someone entered the sealed area, they immediately discovered the 3 spirit weapons. Their eyes immediately turned crimson red. Rumble. The 3 spirit artifacts immediately caused a huge battle to break out. The 3 spirit artifacts caused hundreds of people to be severely injured or killed. Furthermore, even more people were still fighting over them. In the end, the spectating experts could not bear it any longer. One after another, they soared into the sky and entered the sealed land. There are plenty of spirit artifacts that you can take. The burly man in short robes had only one eye. His gaze was as sharp as a large knife. With a wave of his hand, he sent several people flying and kept a spirit artifact in his hand. It's a spirit artifact. It's good to keep it as a gift. A tall and skinny old man appeared. Wherever he passed, the surrounding space distorted. One figure after another was sent flying. Then, he grabbed the second spirit artifact in his hand. Get out of the way. Mu Mingqing's figure landed on the ground. A terrifying aura erupted, and the surrounding dozen people were sent flying in all directions. Then, he snatched the third spirit artifact. There are more spirit artifacts in front. Hurry up and snatch them. Another person discovered the spirit artifacts in front of them. One after another, they rushed over and a huge battle was about to break out. Whoosh! Everyone entered the sealed land and immediately spread out to search for the real treasure. Oh no, there are puppets. Isn't this the kind of puppet that appeared a few days ago? Suddenly, puppets appeared in the sealed land. They were extremely strange puppets, but their power was terrifying. They could kill Pulse spiritual realm cultivators as if they were nothing. Even martial marquee realm cultivators could not do anything to those puppets. These puppets seemed to have a mind of their own. They killed the intruders directly. Many people were torn to pieces by the puppets, and a mist of blood spilled out. However, this did not stop the crowd from searching for treasures. A steady stream of people entered the sealed land. There were fights everywhere, and the rumbling sound of explosions resounded through the sky. In the cave, Du Xiaofu was sitting cross-legged. His body was covered in a golden light. The mysterious runes on the talisman flickered, and his aura was domineering. After 5 days, Du Xiaofu had succeeded. Of course, this success did not mean that Du Xiaofu had successfully broken through the bone marrow cleansing body refining technique. It was just that the blood essence of the Xinyun Scarlet Dragon had successfully carried out the first bone marrow cleansing body refining technique. The blood essence of a demonic beast on the heavenly beast list was far from enough to reach the level of bone washing and marrow cleansing. Enduring the intense pain in his body, Du Xiaofu spent an entire 5 days refining the boundless energy within the Scarlet Cloud Dragon's blood essence into every bit of his flesh, blood, bones, and cells. Du Xiaofu used the violent energy within the Scarlet Cloud Flood Dragon's blood essence to cleanse his body, washing away the impurities hidden within his bones and marrow. At the same time, he used the boundless energy contained in his blood essence to nourish his body. With this two-pronged approach, he could cleanse his bones and cleanse his marrow. At this moment, one could faintly see that Du Xiaofu's body was covered in a layer of faint black substance from head to toe. It was like a sticky liquid that stained Du Xiaofu's body. These were the impurities within the depths of Du Xiaofu's bones and marrow, and they were cleansed and cleansed by the violent energy contained within the Scarlet Cloud WRM's blood essence. Walala! Du Xiaofu sat cross-legged, golden light spreading all over his body. Mysterious runes flashed, and from afar, he looked like a golden-winged rock. He was domineering, fierce, and terrifying. enough to make 10,000 beasts prostrate themselves. At this moment, using the scarlet cloud Wurm's blood essence to cleanse his bones and marrow, Du Xiaofu had once again strengthened his body. And before this, in terms of refining his golden feathers, Du Xiaofu had cultivated to the true rock realm that even a true golden-winged rock would find difficult to reach. Although this didn't make too much progress in terms of cultivation, the benefits it brought were astonishing. It could allow one's combat strength to increase by a frightening amount. His strength was simply not something that could be compared to someone of the same cultivation level. It would be easy for him to kill opponents of a higher cultivation level. Changing his hand seals, a flame spread out from his body, burning away the impurities on his body. Walala! Wrapped in flames and flickering runes, Du Xiaofu's entire body was resplendent. His body was sparkling and translucent, and even the long black hair on his back was wrapped in golden runes. He was like a god, emitting a domineering aura that was ancient and mysterious. After a moment, the aura around his body converged, and the resplendent golden light entered his body. Huff! Just as the last strand of golden light converged, Du Xiaofu spat out a mouthful of turbid air. His eyes suddenly opened, and a golden light burst out, and a domineering aura swept out. Boom! The aura shook the entire cave. Without a doubt, Du Xiaofu's strength had once again skyrocketed after cleansing his bones, marrow, and body. The effect is not bad. Feeling the strength of his body, Du Xiaofu smiled and muttered. He even discovered that his cultivation level had increased by quite a bit. The violent energy contained in the Xianyun Scarlet Dragon's blood essence had more or less turned into Xian Qi. After tidying up, Du Xiaofu undid the seal outside the cave and walked out. It was noon, and the sun was shining brightly outside. He immediately saw Du Xiaoyao, who had just exited the cave. "You're finally out?" Seeing Du Xiaofu, Yi Piaoling sighed. Then, she looked at Du Xiaofu with some doubt in her eyes and said, why do I feel that your cultivation has improved again?" Du Xiaofu smiled and said, "I should have improved a little. Why are you waiting for me?" Yi Piaoling raised her eyes and said, "You've been in seclusion for 5 days, but the outside world has been turned upside down? What's going on? Did something big happen?" Hearing this, Du Xiaofu's expression became serious and his heart tightened. He asked Yi Piaoling. Yi Piaoling said, "Just a few days ago, a sealed place appeared. I suspect that the Weapon Venerable's cave is inside. Now, everyone has gone to look for treasures. Yesterday, a few people accidentally broke in, so I caught them and asked them about the situation." Then, Yi Piaoling told Du Xiaofu what had happened recently. It was said that a sealed place had appeared a few days ago, and many spiritual weapons had appeared inside. It had caused a fierce fight, and countless people had died. Experts from the 2 sects of the pavilion and the fort had also joined in. There were even many experts who had hidden themselves. Even the experts from the 2 sects of the pavilion and the fort had to be cautious. In the sealed place, all kinds of puppets had appeared. Those terrifying puppets had killed many experts, including many martial marquee experts. However, until now, no one had found the location of the Weapon Venerable's cave. Could this be the great fortune and opportunity? Hearing Yi Piaoling's introduction, Du Xiaofu immediately thought of the great fortune and opportunity that Grandma Silverflower had mentioned. According to what Grandma Silverflower had said, a great fortune would appear here not long after, and it should be at the sealed grounds. Weapon Venerable's cave? What is that? Du Xiaofu raised his head and asked Yi Piaoling. Chapter 334. Legend has it that the Weapon Venerable was the top blacksmith in the central continent thousands of years ago. He walked out of the dark forest and became famous throughout the central continent. Everyone had always thought that the weapon talisman masters among the talisman masters were the least useful. Although they could refine spirit weapons and talisman weapons, most of them were used to increase the strength of others. Their own strength would not be too strong. Compared to the talisman masters, and martial cultivators, weapon talisman masters were the weakest. However, the venerable weapon had broken everyone's expectations. He had become an overlord through forging weapons. His puppets were extremely powerful, and he had become an overlord through forging weapons. Legend has it that the weapon Venerable failed to make a weapon and died. He most likely died in the dark forest. Therefore, in the past thousands of years, there has been a legend about the weapon Venerable's cave. It is said that whoever gets the weapon Venerable's cave can get countless treasures and may even get the weapon Venerable's inheritance. It is said that the weapon Venerable was an 8-star talisman master, equivalent to a martial honorable. Yi Piaoling said with awe and yearning in his eyes. Then, he briefly told Du Xiaofu about the situation in the cave of the venerable weapon master. He had heard about it, so he didn't know whether it was true or not. 8-star talisman master, equivalent to a martial honorable. Du Xiaofu's heart sank. That level was worthy of being an expert who stood in the central continent thousands of years ago. He then looked at Yi Piaoling and asked, "Why don't you go look for the weapon Venerable's cave? Many people have come here these days. I'm afraid they will affect your closed-door training." Yi Piaoling said softly. "Thank you." Du Xiaofu smiled and didn't say much. Yi Piaoling didn't look for the weapon Venerable's cave because she was afraid that others would affect her closed-door training. This made Du Xiaofu's heart waver a lot. How many people could resist the attraction of the weapon Venerable's cave? "Are you interested in taking a look?" Yi Piaoling said to Du Xiaofu. "I don't think it's been long since the news about the sealed land has spread. I'm afraid that in a few days at the latest, there will be experts from the Central Plains who will come to look for the weapon Venerable's cave. Of course I'm interested. Let's go together." Du Xiaofu was naturally interested. He had waited here for so long, and it was all for the sake of this great opportunity. The two of them did not need to pack anything. Immediately, they leaped into the air and rushed towards the sealed area. The sealed land was no longer sealed. It was as if a vast mountain range had appeared out of thin air. However, the air in this mountain range was filled with a fiendish aura, and not a single blade of grass grew. For some reason, it was completely barren. How terrifying! Even a martial lord expert was torn to shreds. What a terrifying puppet! I also saw the Marquis of Qinzhou of the Stone Dragon Empire fall. He came to the sealed land to search for treasures. It's said that he obtained a practitioner weapon. I didn't expect him to fall in the sealed land. I don't know who killed him and stole his treasure. What's so strange about that? This is the Dark Forest, not the Stone Dragon Empire. The governor of Qinzhou is nothing in the Dark Forest. With Du Xiaoyao on his shoulder, Du Xiaofu and Yi Piaoling entered the sealed land. Along the way, they saw many corpses and traces of fighting. From the discussions, Du Xiaofu and Yi Piaoling learned a lot about the current situation in the sealed land. It was said that several practitioner weapons had appeared in the sealed land these days. More and more experts received the news. Some of them were from the Stone Dragon Empire, while others were from the surrounding empires. They all rushed to the sealed land. However, there were also many experts who fell in the sealed land. There were battles and fights every day. There were countless deaths and injuries on this land. The killing intent was overwhelming. The experts of the one pavilion, one castle, and 2 sects had entered the sealed land long ago. However, a few days had passed. Although many spiritual weapons and practitioner weapons had appeared, no one had found the real weapon Venerable's cave. Bang, bang, bang. In the desolate mountain range filled with murderous aura, rumbling noises could be heard without end. Hundreds and thousands of people were watching the battle on the mountain top. However, they didn't dare to get close. There were dozens of people standing on the mountain top. They were dressed differently, but their auras were extremely terrifying. The weakest among them was at the pulse spirit nirvana realm or above. There were more than a dozen corpses on the mountain top. Apparently, there had been a great battle and more than a dozen people had fallen. At this moment, there were 3 people fighting fiercely in the air above the mountain peak. The 3 of them were all martial lord realm cultivators. With a raise of their hands, they distorted space. The energy fluctuations were like surging waves, and the muffled sounds of energy resounded in the air. Bang, bang, bang. In the sky, 2 middle-aged men among the 3 martial lords besieged a burly man. The burly man who was besieged looked like he was in his 40s. He was 7 feet tall and thin. He wore a tight short shirt. His eyes shone brightly. However, it was difficult for 2 fists to fight against 4 hands. especially when one of the two middle-aged men besieging him was at the mysterious level of martial lord. The burly man was finally unable to resist. That person seems familiar. In the crowd, a young man in a purple robe with a golden monkey on his shoulder looked at the burly man who was at a disadvantage in the air. He raised his eyebrows and seemed to find him familiar. It was Du Xiaofu who came to join in the fun. The guy you let go of in the Four Seas Inn. Yi Piaoling said. Seems like it. I remember now. That guy isn't a good person either. However, he is good to his own people. He is quite loyal. Du Xiaofu remembered that the burly man seemed to be Hua Fankong, the leader of the Kuei Shagang in the Four Seas and in the Dark City. He didn't expect to meet him here again. Bang! Finally, Hua Fankong's fists were unable to fight against four hands. The middle-aged man in the mysterious level of martial lord behind him punched him in the back. His body fell from the sky onto the hillside, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Swish! On the hillside, Hua Fankong's body rubbed against the ground for more than 10 meters before he could stabilize himself. His face was pale. The two middle-aged men in the martial lord realm besieged Hua Fankong again. One of them, a middle-aged man in a long robe, looked down at Hua Fankong who was on the ground. His eyes were cold and he shouted, "Hand over the spiritual weapon." Bah! Hua Fankong stood up and spat out the remaining blood in his mouth. His eyes were bloodshot as he looked at the middle-aged man in a long robe who had just spoken. He said in a deep voice, "You want a spiritual weapon after killing my brother? Dream on. If you don't hand over the spiritual weapon, die." The middle-aged man in a long robe continued to say coldly, "Haha." Hua Fankong laughed and sneered. "Do you people from the Tianhu Empire think that I'm a fool? Even if I hand it over to you, I'm afraid that I won't be any better. Furthermore, you killed my brother, and you want my spiritual weapon? Do you think that the people of the dark forest are spineless?" The middle-aged man in a long robe sneered with a sense of superiority in his eyes. The Tianhu Empire was much stronger than the Stone Dragon Empire. Moreover, this guy in front of him was only from the dark forest. They looked down on the dark forest, just like how the people in the city look down on the people in the slums. If you don't have the strength, then don't force yourself. Since you don't want to hand it over, then I'll have to fulfill your wish. As soon as he finished speaking, the middle-aged man in a long robe unleashed his aura. He threw out a palm print that was as powerful as the ocean towards Hua Fankong. Hua Fankong's eyes darkened and he gritted his teeth. Chi. At this moment, a black-robed figure appeared in front of Hua Fankong and threw out a palm print towards the middle-aged man in a long robe. Bang! A low muffled sound was emitted. Energy poured out in a violent manner. The black-clothed figure merely swayed a little, but the long-clothed middle-aged man staggered back a couple of steps. His eyes revealed a shocked expression. He immediately lifted his head and looked at the person who had charged out. The black-robed figure who had suddenly appeared was Yi Piaoling. His expression was indifferent, but his eyes were sharp. "It's you, little brother?" Hua Fankong was stunned for a moment before he recognized Yi Piaoling. He was pleasantly surprised. He wanted to call Yi Piaoling little brother, but he couldn't bring himself to call Yi Piaoling little brother when he recalled the terrifying strength of the black-robed young man at the Four Seas Inn. "I don't understand. Why do you like to meddle in other people's business?" A faint voice was heard. Du Xiaofu appeared beside Yi Piaoling. Du Xiaoyao, who was on his shoulder, was looking around with her pale golden eyes. When Hua Fankong saw Du Xiaofu, he was shocked as well. He had personally witnessed the fierceness and killing intent of this purple-robed young man. Yi Piaoling looked at Hua Fankong and smiled. He then said to Du Xiaofu, "I saved this guy because I owed you a favor. Now that I see him, I naturally don't want him to die in front of me." "That's true. If this guy died in front of you, it would be uncomfortable. I didn't kill this guy, but it would be uncomfortable for him to die in front of me." Du Xiaofu nodded. He understood Yi Piaoling's feelings. The two of them chatted. At this moment, they didn't even care about the middle-aged man in the martial lord realm. They didn't even look at him. Where did this kid come from? How dare he meddle in other people's business? Seeing that Yi Piaoling and Du Xiaofu had intervened, the other middle-aged man, who had been silent all this while, had an ugly expression on his face. He wore a loose robe, and his cultivation was at the profound martial marquis realm. Go as far as you can from now on. You can't kill this guy, Du Xiaofu said to the middle-aged man in the loose robe. Kid, you sure are arrogant. Don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. In front of the Tianhu Empire, you can't meddle in other people's business. You better scram. The middle-aged man in the loose robe looked at Du Xiaofu and said in a deep voice, You're courting death. Du Xiaofu's eyes suddenly trembled, and his expression suddenly became gloomy and cold. Today's update is complete. Chapter 335. Translator. H2 to Mr. Brat, you must be tired of living. The middle-aged man in a wide robe of the martial lord realm was shocked. Then, he flew into a rage, his eyes filled with anger. As the head of a prefecture, who would normally dare to speak to him in such a manner? But now, this seemingly young man actually dared to provoke him in such a manner. How could he not be enraged? Instantly, a terrifying martial lord's mysterious aura pressed down on Du Xiaofu. You're the one who's tired of living. Come and die. Under the pressure of the chi of the martial marquis realm cultivator, Du Xiaofu's expression was cold and unmoved. The corner of his mouth curled into a sneer as he pointed at the middle-aged man in a wide robe and shouted. Du Xiaofu did not take the middle-aged man in a wide robe seriously at all. He had already killed a martial lord realm nirvana realm cultivator. Why would he be afraid of a martial lord realm mystery realm cultivator? What an arrogant young man. That's a prefecture head of the Tianhu Empire. He's very strong. That young man is probably the head of some empire. Usually, he doesn't take anyone seriously. Now, he's so arrogant in front of a martial lord realm expert. The surrounding crowd instantly started discussing. No one was optimistic about Du Xiaofu. No matter how strong a young man was, could he deal with a martial lord realm cultivator? That was impossible. That bastard is going to be in big trouble. Only Hua Fankong was secretly laughing. Although the purple-robed young man was also his enemy and had almost taken his life last time, and even stole his Qinkuan bag, in this situation, Hua Fankong naturally chose to put himself and Du Xiaofu on the same side. At this moment, Hua Fankong was waiting to see the end of the middle-aged man in a wide robe. He had seen with his own eyes how fierce the purple-robed young man was. However, at this moment, Hua Fankong was also slightly worried. The middle-aged man in a wide robe was at the martial lord realm mystery realm. From the situation at the Four Seas Inn, the purple-robed young man did not seem to have the strength to deal with a martial lord realm mystery realm cultivator. Little bastard, no matter who you are, you're going to die today. The middle-aged man in a wide robe couldn't endure it any longer. A wave of killing intent surged, and a cold light filled his eyes. His figure suddenly shot out explosively, and his profound chi surged like a storm. He waved his hand, and a palm print directly blasted towards Du Xiaofu. Boom! The moment a martial lord realm expert of the mystical level attacked, his aura overflowed the heavens. A storm of energy swept out, shaking the hearts and souls of people. Wherever the figure of the middle-aged man in a wide robe passed, space would faintly distort. The aura of a martial marquis's mysterious cultivation level erupted without reservation, and a terrifying, oppressive force swept out along with the flickering of runes. Such a vigorous aura caused the spectators in the distance to feel an enormous pressure. The strength of a martial marquis mysterious level expert had definitely reached a terrifying level. Under the enormous pressure, Du Xiaofu still did not move. The enormous pressure swept out, causing his purple robe to flutter. Bang! In the time it took for a spark to fly off a piece of flint, Du Xiaofu allowed the palm strike to directly strike his chest. He didn't dodge or evade, and directly took the palm strike of a martial marquis realm expert head-on. The layer of light golden profound chi defense on his body was directly destroyed, and then the palm strike directly landed on his chest. You're courting death. At the same time, Du Xiaofu's expression was ice-cold. In a world where strength was respected, how could he be too benevolent? Killing intent spread out from his clear eyes in an instant. He waved his hand, and golden talisman mysterious runes wrapped around his palm. His hand was like a palm leaf fan as it swung out. Whoosh! At this moment, Du Xiaofu's hand was like a rock spreading its wings. A dent appeared in space, and it carried the domineering will of the golden rock. It fiercely rose up, and with the force of thunder, it heavily smashed onto the head of the middle-aged man in a wide robe. Suddenly, the middle-aged man in a wide robe seemed to have suddenly felt something. His pupils abruptly shrank, but it was already too late. Boom! A low, muffled sound rang out, and terrifying talismans spread out. The energy spread out like a storm, and on the entire mountain top, cracks spread out rapidly, as if there was an earthquake. Thump thump, Du Xiaofu's figure was shaken by the opponent's palm, and he staggered back 7 steps before stabilizing his body. Everything under his feet turned into dust. But at this moment, the middle-aged man in a wide robe, who was at the mysterious level of Martial Marquis mysterious level, had his head, which was the weakest part of his body, shattered into pieces. Du Xiaofu's sky-shaking wings directly smashed his head into a bloody mist. The entire surrounding space suddenly became silent, and all of this was beyond everyone's expectations. Originally, all of the onlookers thought that the purple-robed youth was too arrogant, but they did not expect the purple-robed youth's strength to be so terrifying. A Martial Marquis mysterious level expert's head was smashed into pieces with a single slap. Such strength, how terrifying! At this moment, everyone in the Tianhu Empire was dumbfounded, and they could not recover from their shock. You can go to hell too. After Du Xiaofu retreated a few steps, he stabilized his body. Golden light suddenly burst out, and the mysterious qi under his feet surged out. His figure was like a god, and with an extremely strange speed, he directly pounced towards the middle-aged man in a long robe, who was also dumbfounded at this moment. The middle-aged man in a long robe, who had just reached the Martial Marquis realm, was shocked, but the purple-robed youth had already appeared in front of him in a flash. A domineering aura crushed over, and the space was about to be sealed, making it difficult for him to retreat. In a panic, the middle-aged man in a long robe clenched his teeth and condensed his hand seals. Talismans surged, and he connected with his martial vein and merged with his vein spirit. Roar! A crimson-red, scaled figure of a strange beast, which looked like a tiger or a wolf, appeared. It had 4 wings, and its aura was ferocious and terrifying. It flapped its wings and swept out, sweeping towards Du Xiaofu. Boom! A terrifying energy storm spread over the mountain top, and sand and stones flew everywhere, and the ground shook until it cracked. Humph! Du Xiaofu snorted coldly. Facing the ferocious demonic beast's vain spirit phantom, he directly rushed to kill it. Just as the vain spirit phantom swept over, he waved his hand and grabbed it, wrapped in golden talismans and mysterious runes. The golden claw print expanded and distorted the space. In a flash, the vain spirit phantom, for some reason, suddenly showed fear in its eyes, and then it was directly torn apart by Du Xiaofu's claw. It turned into a storm-like talisman that spread out, and its aura was extremely terrifying. Kill! Du Xiaofu's figure continued to sweep out, and with the momentum of thunder, he fiercely punched the chest of the middle-aged man in a long robe, who was suddenly spurting blood. Bang! The middle-aged man's pupils contracted in fear, and his expression was shocked and unwilling, but he was powerless to resist. Poochie! Blood spurted out, and the middle-aged man in a long robe's chest was directly shattered, and he was directly killed. He had just reached the Martial Marquis realm, and he had no power to resist. In just a few breaths, a Martial Marquis at the mysterious level and a Martial Marquis realm cultivator at the initial level were both dead on the spot. Goo goo. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. If these 2 Martial Marquis realm cultivators were killed by other experts, they might only sigh and not be shocked. However, at this moment, these 2 Martial Marquis realm experts were killed by a purple-robed youth, and this could not help but be shocked. Bastard! Who dares to kill the people of my Tianhu Empire? Suddenly, a loud shout was heard, and from the distant sky, a flowing figure suddenly swept over, bringing with it an incomparably powerful aura. Boom! As this person landed on the messy mountain, the entire ground began to tremble. The person who came was an old man in his 50s. He had a wide forehead and a big face, and his eyes were bright. He looked at the corpses of the middle-aged martial marquis realm cultivators on the ground, and anger shot out from his eyes. Grand Mansion Master Liu, and the others were killed by the purple-robed youth. On the mountain top, the dozens of Pulse Spirit Realm cultivators saw the old man in his 50s as if they had seen their savior. They immediately rushed over, and their faces were pale with fear. "Kid, are you the one who killed the people of my Tianhu Empire?" The old man in his 50s looked at Du Xiaofu, and a cold light shot out from his bright eyes. However, when he looked at Du Xiaofu, he was secretly puzzled. Does a young man really have the strength to kill 2 martial marquis realm experts? Among them, there was one at the mysterious level of the martial marquis realm. Even if he were to attack, it would be difficult to successfully kill him. Du Xiaofu looked at the old man in his 50s and looked at him coldly. He said in a deep voice, "You are only at the Nirvana realm of the martial marquis realm. A few days ago, I killed 2 of them. If you don't get lost, I will kill you on the spot. Get lost." His shout was like thunder, rumbling and overbearing. Oh my God, did this young man really kill martial marquis realm experts at the Nirvana realm? The surrounding onlookers were shocked, and their eyes trembled as they looked at the purple-robed youth. They could not help but tremble. The old man in his 50s from the Tianhu Empire was also shocked at this moment, and his eyes were faintly trembling. He was only at the Nirvana realm of the martial marquis realm. If what the young man said was true, then he would most likely be killed by the young man. "Let's go." After fiercely glaring at Du Xiaofu, the old man in his 50s gritted his teeth and said to the dozens of spiritual pulse realm cultivators beside him. He flicked his sleeves and immediately left. The old man in his 50s was scared. The young man had easily killed 2 martial marquis realm experts. He was most likely telling the truth. He had really killed martial marquis realm experts at the Nirvana realm. Moreover, for a young man with such strength to appear, it was enough to prove that his talent was terrifying, and his background was definitely not ordinary. Perhaps his family or the sect behind him would not be at ease to let him come out alone. Most likely, there would be super experts following him. If the super experts behind him were to appear, then it would be even worse. Whoosh whoosh. Seeing that the mansion master had left, the dozens of spiritual pulse realm cultivators did not dare to stay and immediately fled in panic. Whoosh whoosh. The surrounding people gasped. A martial marquis realm expert at the Nirvana realm had just come in rage, but in the blink of an eye, he was intimidated and retreated by the purple-robed youth. That purple-robed youth was so domineering. Chapter 336. Looking at the people from the Tianhu Empire leaving, Du Xiaofu's clear eyes moved. In the world of cultivators, strength was everything, and the weak were always bullied. If he had not just displayed enough strength to make that martial lord of the Nirvana realm cultivator fearful, the other party would not have left so easily. "I thought you were really going to kill that martial lord of the Nirvana realm, old man." Yi Piaoling walked up to Du Xiaofu's side with a smile, but there was also some shock in her eyes. It could be seen that in just a few days of seclusion, this guy's strength had increased by a lot. Martial lord of the Nirvana realm is troublesome to kill. I don't have time now. Du Xiaofu smiled faintly. Being able to kill a martial lord of the mystery realm did not mean that he could kill a martial lord of the Nirvana realm. Even if he teamed up with Du Xiaoyao, it would still be troublesome. Moreover, there were countless strong people here. If it caused any unnecessary trouble, it would not be necessary. Your physical body has been cultivated to a terrifying level. Yi Piaoling looked at Du Xiaofu. To be fine after taking an attack from a martial lord of the mystery realm head-on. This physical body was too terrifying. That guy's strength is too weak. If it were you, I would not dare to take it head-on. Du Xiaofu said. What he said was the truth. If it were Yi Piaoling's attack, he would not dare to take it head-on either. I can feel the traces of a seal. There are energy waves inside. Suddenly, Du Xiaoyao said to Du Xiaofu. Her pale golden eyes looked at the barren mountain peaks on the left. Is there another seal inside this seal? Du Xiaofu's eyes moved. This was already a sealed land. At this moment, He did not expect there to be another sealed land inside this sealed land. As for Du Xiaoyao's talent, Du Xiaofu naturally did not doubt it. Let's go over there and take a look. Du Xiaofu looked to the left and said to Yi Piaoling. Yi Piaoling nodded. Just as the two of them were about to head to the left, a figure suddenly appeared in front of them. It was the heavily injured Hua Fankong. Hua Fankong looked at Du Xiaofu and Yi Piaoling. He mustered his courage and said, "Gentlemen, thank you for saving me. Where are you going? I'll go with you." Yi Piaoling and Du Xiaofu looked at each other. Then, Yi Piaoling looked at Hua Fankong and said, "I saved you because I didn't want to see you lose your life in front of me. We don't need anyone to follow us. Go." "I know you don't need anyone to follow you." Hua Fankong wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. His face was pale as he said, "The people I brought are all dead. I'm also heavily injured. This time, there are many people from the Tianhu Empire. If I meet a few of them, I'll definitely be in trouble. Therefore, it's definitely safer to follow you. You're really not polite. Your life and death has nothing to do with us. We saved you because we didn't want to see you die in front of us. If we don't see you die, then it's fine." Du Xiaofu looked at Hua Fankong and thought that this person was weird. It was just that Du Xiaofu didn't want to bring a stranger with him. This wasn't a good thing. "Since you have taken my Chinquin bag, let me follow you. I think you have just arrived here not long ago. You must be here to search for treasures. I have been in this sealed land for a long time. Now, I have a better understanding of the situation here. I am familiar with which places have been searched and which have not been searched. Letting me follow you will not be useless." Hua Fankong looked at Du Xiaofu and Yi Piaoling. He was currently injured. If he continued to stay in the sealed grounds, the consequences would be dire if he encountered people from the Tianhu Empire or some ordinary mortal enemies. However, he was unwilling to leave just like that. Looking at the two young men in front of him, Hua Fankong continued, "You don't have to expend too much effort to bring me along. Although I'm not as strong as you and I'm still injured, I'm still able to protect myself under normal circumstances. Besides, although I, Hua Fankong, dare not say that I'm a good person, I know how to repay kindness. You saved me, so I won't stab you in the back. Even if you find treasures, you can share some with me. Even if you don't share, I'll be satisfied as long as I can see the treasures appear. Let's go. We don't need anyone to follow us." Yi Piaoling shook his head. His expression gradually changed. It was so sharp that no one dared to approach him. "All right. Thank you for saving my life. I'll repay you next time." Hua Fankong could feel the aura on Yi Piaoling's body. He couldn't help but tremble. He cupped his fist and prepared to leave. "Wait, you said that you're familiar with this place. Have you been searched before?" Du Xiaofu looked at Hua Fankong and pointed at the mountain range on the left. Hua Fankong raised his head and looked at the sky on the left. He then replied to Du Xiaofu, "Someone should have searched around there. However, I'm not sure about the distance. I heard that a lot of experts have gone there recently. There are too many experts, so many of the weaker ones don't dare to get close. Old Yi, how about letting him follow us?" Du Xiaofu turned to Yi Piaoling and asked. "It's up to you." Yi Piaoling didn't have any objections and nodded at Du Xiaofu. "I can let you follow us. However, you have to remember that if you dare to do anything, don't blame me for being impolite." Du Xiaofu looked at Hua Fankong. His eyes were slightly gloomy and emitted a faint chill that made people's hair stand on end. "Don't worry. I, Hua Fankong, am not a person who bites the hand that feeds me." Hua Fankong patted his chest and said, "Swoosh, swoosh." Du Xiaofu's eyes moved. Then, the three of them soared into the sky and left. "Who exactly is that young man? He's so powerful. I remember now. That young man seems to be from Tianwu Academy. Back then, he was the fiercest one in the Four Seas Inn in the Dark City. I remember now. That young man wore a cloak and bought the mysterious spirit Heaven Vine in the Mu family's trading company. Later on, he was pursued by experts from the pavilion and castle. I didn't expect him to appear again. He seems to be getting stronger. That young man seems to be called Du Xiaofu." As Du Xiaofu's group soared into the sky, many discussions spread out. At this moment, Du Xiaofu, Yi Piaoling, and Hua Fankong soared into the sky and appeared in a densely packed mountain range. Bang, bang. There were fights everywhere. In the distant sky, a one-eyed expert slapped out with his palm, and a resplendent light erupted. Rumbling sounds rang out incessantly, like a mountain torrent. In the end, a burly man was sent flying. His body smashed into the ground, and no one knew whether he was dead or alive. What powerful strength! Could he have reached the martial king realm? Du Xiaofu was shocked. Even from afar, he could feel how terrifying the one-eyed expert was. Even from afar, he could feel that the profound energy in his body was about to stagnate. It's still in front. The seal there is very powerful. Du Xiaoyao continued to look ahead and felt the traces of the seal. Let's go. Du Xiaofu soared into the sky. He didn't know if it was because of his pulse spirit, but he could faintly feel that there was a suppressed aura in front of him that was about to burst out. Look, the two sect leaders of the twin hatred sect are fighting with someone. They seem to be fighting over a talisman weapon. On top of a canyon, a tall and thin old man was fighting fiercely with two old men in long robes who were around 70 years old. They looked very similar to twins. 3 terrifying auras spread out, and each of them had the power to distort space. Rumble. At this moment, the 3 of them were fighting. Profound chi filled the sky and runes were dazzling. The battle was so fierce that it made people tremble in fear. It's really the twin hatred sects Hintian. In the crowd, Du Xiaofu looked at the 3 people fighting fiercely. Du Xiaofu had seen the 2 old men in their 70s before. They were the twin hatred sects Hintian brothers, who were both in the martial king realm. At this moment, the other tall and thin old man was actually able to fight evenly with the 2 brothers. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. No wonder there were hidden dragons and crouching tigers in the dark forest. At this moment, the tall and thin old man was so powerful. Hintian and Hintian are very powerful. When they join forces, they are even more powerful. Even the Mu family fort master Mu Mingqing, the Black Fiend sect master Xue Tianqiu, and the Myriad Cloud Pavilion master Wan Sampang are afraid of them. Hua Fankong said to Du Xiaofu and Yi Piaoling, "Let's go." Du Xiaofu lowered his head and quietly left. Many people from the twin hatred sect had seen him before. If someone recognized him, it would definitely not be a good thing. Following Du Xiaoyao's directions, Du Xiaofu also quietly left when there were many people around in order to not attract attention. The 3 of them also encountered many disputes and fights from time to time. In the middle of it, they were almost affected. However, some people felt that the 3 of them were not ordinary and immediately left, not daring to provoke them. In the sky above a valley, Du Xiaofu saw the Mu family fort master Mu Mingqing and the Black Fiend sect master Xue Tianqiu fighting. Boom! Mu Mingqing's battle saber runes filled the sky. The energy fluctuated violently, and the profound chi was monstrous. It swept across the sky, causing the space to ripple. Whoosh! Xue Tianqiu gripped the black saber tightly. The murderous aura was monstrous, causing people's hearts to tremble and their hairs to stand on end. Rumble. For some reason, the 2 of them were fighting. Both of them had the power to suppress the sky. Every move they made was soul-stirring. The sound of energy explosions was incessant. The terrifying energy storm made people not dare to get close. If they were not strong enough and were affected, the outcome could be imagined. Chapter 337. Rumble. Translator. Nyoibo Studio Editor. Nyoibo Studio. The 2 of them started fighting for some reason. Both of them had the power to suppress the sky. Every move they made shook the hearts of the onlookers. Sonic booms of energy could be heard everywhere. The terrifying energy storm kept people away. As expected of the fort master of the Mu family fort and the sect leader of the Black Fiend sect. The strength of a martial king is indeed terrifying. Hua Fankong's eyes trembled as he watched the battle between the 2 powerhouses in the sky. The strength of a martial king was also what he wanted. It was a pity that to reach the level of a martial king, even if one had the cultivation of a martial lord, one could only look on helplessly. Out of the countless martial marquises, those who had the talent and the opportunity to step into the martial king realm were extremely rare among the martial marquises. Many martial lords who were at the peak of the complete martial lord realm could not reach the level of a martial king even after spending their entire lives. Let's go. Du Xiaofu looked at the fight between the two powerhouses in mid-air. Naturally, he owed the Mu clan fort a favor. However, at this time, he could not help with his strength. Even if he showed up to help, he was afraid that he would bring a lot of trouble to the Mu clan fort. Yi Piaoling nodded. The three of them continued to leave silently among the crowd. The surrounding onlookers were all watching the fight between the two top powers in the sky. No one paid attention to the three of them. They did not know how vast the inside of the sealed land was. The three of them flew over many mountains, but they still had not reached their destination. Rumor has it that the honorable weapon has reached the cultivation of an 8-star spiritual talisman master. It is really terrifying to be able to seal such a large space. I'm afraid that the honorable weapon is not only a talisman master, but also an array talisman master, Yi Piaoling said softly. 8-star spiritual talisman master. I wonder when he will be able to reach that level. Du Xiaofu sighed. An 8-star spiritual talisman master was equivalent to a martial honorable. It was the true top power in this mainland. Just ahead. It's just ahead. The fluctuation of the seal is getting more and more intense. The aura seems to be very terrifying. Du Xiaoyao stood on Du Xiaofu's shoulder. She could feel a terrifying fluctuation coming from the seal, causing her gaze to become a little solemn. Let's be careful, Du Xiaofu said to Yi Piaoling, and very good-looking. The aura coming from the front made their hearts tremble for no reason. Then, the three of them continued forward. Along the way, they were very careful and did not dare to be careless. Especially after hearing from Hua Fankong that there were many puppets in the sealed land, Du Xiaofu had to be even more careful. Those puppets must have been refined by Senior Weapon Sovereign. Rumor has it that the puppets refined by Senior Weapon Sovereign are shockingly powerful. Back then, many top sects in the central continent wanted to recruit Senior Weapon Sovereign, not only because of Senior Weapon Sovereign's strength and refining skills, but also because of Senior Weapon Sovereign's skills in refining puppets, said Yi Piaoling. Puppet. Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows slightly. He did not know much about puppets. However, Du Xiaofu had heard Zhen Qingshun mention a little about puppets. It was said that some weapon talisman masters could refine various puppets with refining materials, just like refining spiritual weapons and talisman weapons. Puppets were also divided into many types. Puppets could be refined with refining materials. Puppets could also be refined with demonic beasts, and so on. There were many types, but there were very few weapon talisman masters who could refine puppets, and even fewer weapon talisman masters who could refine powerful puppets. The puppets refined by weapon talisman masters would be completely obedient to their masters after they were equipped with special means. They would never betray their masters and would follow their master's orders. After learning about puppets from Zhen Qingshun, Du Xiaofu had thought that if he could refine puppets, it would be a good choice to refine a lot of puppets by his side. However, Zhen Qingshun was not good at refining weapons and knew even less about refining puppets. Therefore, Du Xiaofu did not take the matter of refining puppets to heart. At dusk, the afterglow of the sun shone on the horizon. In the depths of a barren mountain range, there was a large valley. The valleys were continuous like cliffs. The depths of the valley were terrifyingly quiet and desolate. The surroundings of this valley were even more desolate, causing people to feel uneasy for no reason. At this moment, there was no one near this place. However, it was not that there was no one at all. It was just that there were very few people. When they saw each other, they were all quite defensive. It's around here. Du Xiaoyao's eyes narrowed as he stared at the deep valley in front of him. This aura is very terrifying, Du Xiaofu said softly. For no reason, he felt an extremely terrifying aura around him. It was as if a monstrous beast was about to erupt. The faint aura made people's souls uneasy and extremely terrifying. Help! Suddenly, a cry for help came from the space in front of him. In the valley, several figures rushed out in a panic and fled quickly. Tsk tisk. 2 streaks of light shot into the sky like lightning, tearing 2 Meridian Spirit Realm cultivators who were fleeing in panic into pieces. Du Xiaofu, Yi Piaoling, and Hua Fankong stared at the 2 streams of light. They saw that the two streams of light were extremely majestic. Their bodies were bronze in color, as if they were covered in armor. There were runes on their bodies, and an extremely violent aura spread out. The two figures were completely in human form, but their heads were in the shape of wolf heads. Their eyes were shining brightly. Ao, ao. A wolf-like howl was emitted from the mouth of the strange, human-shaped wolf-headed creature. Its hands were like the claws of a wolf, and runes covered them. It seemed as if it wanted to tear space apart. With a wave of its hand, it tore the numerous people who were fleeing into pieces. That's a wolf puppet. It can kill puppets in the Martial Lord realm and the Martial Lord realm at the mystery level. 2 days ago, Mu Mingqing, the master of the Mu family fort, and Wan Sampang, the pavilion master of the 10,000 Clouds Pavilion, each obtained one. Seeing the human-shaped wolf-headed figure, Hua Fangkong's expression changed drastically. He had seen the terrifying puppet with his own eyes. It tore a Martial Lord realm mysterious level cultivator into pieces. So that's a puppet. Looking at the two puppets in the air, Du Xiaofu's eyes were filled with shock and curiosity. This was the first time that Du Xiaofu had come into contact with puppets. The terrifying aura was extremely powerful. The puppet's level was not low. Ao. In the air, the two puppets stared at Du Xiaofu, Yi Piaoling, and Hua Fangkong. The eyes of the two puppets were filled with emotionless indifference and killing intent. That kind of killing intent and indifference was like a simple instinct that did not carry any emotion. It caused people to feel a chill in their hearts when they looked at the ice-cold killing intent in their eyes. Oh no, we've been targeted by the puppets. Hua Fangkong's expression changed. He instinctively wanted to run away. The puppet was too powerful. He knew that he could not fight against it. However, when he saw Du Xiaofu and Yi Piaoling making their moves, Hua Fangkong gritted his teeth and continued to stand behind them. There are only two effective ways to deal with puppets. The first is to destroy them directly. The second is to destroy their control. However, the second is too difficult. It's impossible to do, Yi Piaoling said to Du Xiaofu. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Ao. As soon as Yi Piaoling finished speaking, the two wolf puppets had already swooped down. The runes on their bodies exploded as if they had the power to wipe out 1,000 soldiers. One for each of us. Du Xiaofu's expression also turned serious. As soon as he finished speaking to Yi Piaoling, one of the wolf puppets had already pounced in front of him like lightning. Its majestic body was at least 2 meters tall. Flowing runes were shining brightly. It carried a terrifying energy that seemed to be able to suppress and freeze space. Its eyes were filled with killing intent. A huge claw tore through space, trying to tear Du Xiaofu into pieces. Oscillating fist. Profound qi erupted from his body, and profound qi gushed out from the soles of his feet. Du Xiaofu's feet touched the ground, and his figure soared into the sky. He also wanted to test just how terrifying this puppet was. The oscillating fist condensed, and 13 consecutive sounds exploded in the air. Immediately, the fist heavily collided with the wolf puppet's claw. Bang bang! With a low muffled sound, the runes exploded. The muffled sound was like thunder. Under the terrifying force, Du Xiaofu's figure staggered and retreated. Swish! His feet landed on the ground. Then, he rubbed against the ground and retreated more than 10 meters before stabilizing his body. Under the violent force, Du Xiaofu's profound qi stagnated. His fist was a little numb. On the other hand, the wolf puppet was only slightly pushed back. What a terrifying puppet! Du Xiaofu exclaimed in his heart. He had always had some confidence in his physical body. At this moment, Du Xiaofu's fist was numb. This proved how terrifying this puppet was. These puppets are all made from refining materials. You can't easily take them head-on. Yi Piaoling's voice came from not far away. At this moment, facing the other wolf puppet's attack, Yi Piaoling didn't take it head-on. Her voice was like a ghost as she dodged. However, the wolf puppet's speed was just as terrifying. Suddenly, the majestic figure turned around and continued to attack Yi Piaoling. Every attack was at full strength. It was simple and fierce. Oh, whoa. In a short period of time, the wolf puppet that was slightly pushed back attacked Du Xiaofu again. Its claws swept over with vigorous and sharp momentum. These puppets were all at the martial lord realm, or above the nirvana realm. They also had terrifying puppet bodies. It could be said that these puppets' bodies were much more terrifying than the bodies of ordinary demonic beasts. They were originally made from refining materials, so their defense was extremely terrifying. Wave-like carefree steps. Du Xiaofu didn't dare to take it head-on. He activated wave-like carefree steps to dodge. Today's update is complete. Chapter 338. Translator. H2DH2, Mr. the Wolf Puppet swiped past Du Xiaofu's back, tearing the air apart. Damn it, this puppet is so strong. Du Xiaofu cursed loudly. There was simply no way to fight against this puppet, nor could he resist it head-on. If he were to fight against this terrifying puppet, he would lose all his advantages. Not only would he not gain any advantage, he would also be at a disadvantage. Chi. The wolf puppet disappeared in a flash. Even its speed was extremely terrifying, chasing after Du Xiaofu like a shadow. Claw after claw, accompanied by fierce energy and runes, shot out explosively, engulfing Du Xiaofu. Relying on the wave-like carefree steps, Du Xiaofu was still able to dodge with difficulty. However, if this were to go on for a long time, it would not be a good idea. Haha, this toy is probably not much worse than a practitioner weapon. Suddenly, Du Xiaoyao, who was on Du Xiaofu's shoulder, laughed. Looking at the wolf puppet that was chasing after them, her face was full of smiles. In her pale golden eyes, there was a look like a child who had seen candy. Whoosh! Just as his voice fell, Du Xiaoyao moved. Golden light erupted from his body, and his figure was like a golden ray of light that flashed towards the wolf puppet that was chasing after him. Golden talisman markings spread out, and directly destroyed the wolf puppet's claw that swung over once again as easily as crushing dry weeds. Kacha! Kacha! Then, Du Xiaoyao's body expanded, transforming into the huge golden ape body. A terrifying aura exploded in front of Hua Fangkong's dumbfounded eyes. Then, she opened her mouth and bit down on the wolf puppet's claw, and a crisp kacha, kacha sound immediately rang out. Then, a shocking scene appeared. The wolf puppet was directly damaged from the claw, and pieces of the rune puppet's body were missing. At this moment, Du Xiaoyao opened her big mouth and chewed them up and swallowed them into her stomach at lightning speed. Under the wolf puppet's ice-cold gaze that was still filled with killing intent, in less than a few breaths, a puppet that could deal with a martial lord at the Nirvana realm was completely eaten by Du Xiaoyao. This thing is really not bad. The taste is similar to the practitioner weapon I ate last time. Du Xiaoyao's huge body was wrapped in golden light, and a satisfied smile appeared in her eyes. Du Xiaofu was shocked. He didn't expect Du Xiaoyao to be so powerful. Not only could she swallow spirit tools and talisman weapons, she could even swallow this terrifying puppet. When he saw Du Xiaoyao, Du Xiaofu's expression immediately turned ugly. He glared at Du Xiaofu and said, Du Xiaoyao, why didn't you take action earlier? You made me get chased for so long. I like to see you in a sorry state. Only then can I prove that I'm stronger than you. Du Xiaoyao said bluntly. Then, she ignored Du Xiaofu and immediately looked at the wolf puppet that was fighting with Yi Piaoling. Yi Piaoling had already activated the serene python to fight the wolf puppet. The serene python's sword light streaked across the space, and in the blossoming sparks, it was able to leave marks on the sturdy puppet. However, it was unable to destroy the terrifying wolf puppet immediately. Leave this puppet to me. Du Xiaoyao appeared, and golden light burst out from her body. The golden talisman inscription spread out and enveloped the wolf puppet. Then, under Yi Piaoling's shocked gaze, the wolf puppet directly became food in Du Xiaoyao's mouth and disappeared with a cracking sound. Gulp! Hua Fangkong, who had been watching from the side, swallowed his saliva and looked at Du Xiaoyao. He was so shocked that he couldn't retract his jaw for a long time. So full. After swallowing the two puppets, Du Xiaoyao's body turned into the size of a little macaque and landed on Du Xiaofu's shoulder. She burped with satisfaction. So strong. Yi Piaoling looked at Du Xiaoyao and was also dumbfounded. Then, he put the serene python back into his body. It's down there. Du Xiaofu's gaze fell on the terrifying and serene gorge at the bottom of the valley. There were fluctuations that ordinary people couldn't detect. That terrifying aura was about to erupt, and it was incomparably ferocious. What's down there? Yi Piaoling asked Du Xiaofu. He looked at the deep valley, but he couldn't sense any fluctuations. In fact, there was nothing special in the deep gorge. I don't know what's down there, Du Xiaofu said to Yi Piaoling and Hua Fankong seriously. It might be very dangerous down there. Do you guys want to go? Since we're already here, of course we have to go. Yi Piaoling looked indifferent and didn't have the slightest intention to retreat. Hua Fankong naturally knew that there might be danger down there. The two puppets just now came out from there. He looked at Du Xiaofu and Yi Piaoling, then looked at Du Xiaoyao. Finally, he gritted his teeth and nodded, saying, "Then I'll go with you. Then be careful," Du Xiaofu said with a serious expression. Then, the three of them moved their qi and landed in the deep gorge. Whoosh! The three of them landed slowly. When they were about 100 meters down, the two sides of the gorge were like deep cliffs. The surroundings were shrouded in clouds and mist, which made the place even more terrifying. The gorge was hundreds of meters long. The three of them landed in the gorge, which was deep and dark. It was a desolate place. Why is the aura down there so terrifying? After landing, Hua Fangkong's expression changed slightly. In the depths of the gorge, there was an invisible aura that made his heart tremble and his hair stand on end. Someone has been here. They must have been killed by the puppets just now. Yi Piaoling's gaze fell on the dozens of corpses not far away. They were all torn apart. It wasn't hard to tell that they were killed by the wolf puppets just now. It's here. I found it. The seal is here. Du Xiaoyao stared at the thick cliff not far away. Her pale golden eyes were full of seriousness. She said to Du Xiaofu seriously, "Du Xiaofu, do you feel it? The aura inside is terrifying. Do you want to go in?" Within the stone walls of the cliff, Du Xiaofu could also feel the traces of the seal. The aura within the seal made people tremble and their souls throb. Fortune comes from danger. Maybe the revered artifact cave that everyone is looking for is inside. Du Xiaofu murmured in his heart. Then, he clenched his teeth and said to Du Xiaoyao, "Of course we'll go in. If there is danger, we'll come out." "Okay, but let's make a deal. If there are treasures, we'll split them in half." Du Xiaoyao reminded Du Xiaofu. She didn't trust Du Xiaofu on this point. Du Xiaofu glanced at Du Xiaoyao and said to Yi Piaoling, "There is a seal inside. Du Xiaoyao and I have some special means to go in, but I'm afraid you guys won't be able to. You guys go in. I'll wait for you here. Be careful," Yi Piaoling said. She looked around suspiciously. There was no energy fluctuation nearby. Was there really a seal? "You guys be careful too." After Du Xiaofu said that, he looked at the sky above the gully covered by clouds. He scratched his chin with his index finger, and a smile appeared on his face. Du Xiaofu couldn't help but feel happy when he thought about how many experts were searching for the revered weapon cave mansion. Now that the revered weapon cave mansion was right in front of him, he decided to let them search for it slowly. Seeing the smile on Du Xiaofu's face, Yi Piaoling's eyes slightly moved and asked, "What are you smiling about?" "Nothing. You guys be careful." Du Xiaofu naturally couldn't say what he was thinking. After saying that, he and Du Xiaoyao looked at each other. Then, under the shocked gazes of Yi Piaoling and Hua Fankong, the runes around Du Xiaofu's body flashed. He communicated with his martial vein and a five-fingered mountain spread out. Boom! As Du Xiaofu's martial vein appeared, dense spiritual energy spread out, derived, evolved, and communicated with the energy of heaven and earth. A terrifying power suddenly spread out and covered Du Xiaofu's body under the mountain's shadow. Phew! At the same time, the mysterious golden runes on the surface of Du Xiaoyao's body flickered and spread over the mountain's shadow around Du Xiaofu in an instant. Swish! The two merged into one, and in the end, it directly rushed toward the cliff in front of it. Then, the golden light swept in and disappeared into the cliff. What kind of technique is this? After watching Du Xiaofu and Du Xiaoyao disappear into the cliff with his own eyes, Hua Fangkong's gaze trembled. After rubbing his eyes, his entire being became sluggish. In the mysterious and huge space, Not even a blade of grass grew. A murderous aura filled the sky. In the space, for huge mountains stood facing each other from afar. They towered into the clouds and were arranged in a square. The surrounding cliffs were so steep that they seemed to be cut by axes. The mountains were so majestic that they seemed to be broken. Boom! In the space, heaven and earth trembled and the 4 huge mountains swayed. On top of the 4 huge mountains, there was a huge, dazzling light that swept across the sky like a divine light. It communicated with the energy of heaven and earth and finally gathered together. For huge beams of divine light converged in the air above the 4 mountain peaks facing each other from afar, forming a huge ball of light that was several hundred feet in size. Above the ball of light, multicolored light spread and mysterious runes filled the sky. The terrifying aura seemed to be able to collapse the world. Buzz buzz. Within the ball of light, there was a faint sound. It was like a dragon's roar, a tiger's roar, a sparrow's cry, and a turtle's cry. When the sound gathered together, it was like a thunderstorm, like the wailing of ghosts and the howling of gods. It was so terrifying that it was indescribable. Du Xiaofu's figure appeared in the space. As soon as his figure appeared, the murderous aura collapsed, causing the profound energy in his body to stagnate. The thunderstorm and the wailing of ghosts and the howling of gods caused his soul to feel a piercing pain. He felt as if he was about to faint. Chapter 339. Just as he was about to faint, Du Xiaofu's heart suddenly trembled, his soul throbbing. Then, he bit down hard on the tip of his tongue, and a sharp pain immediately came from the tip of his tongue. A stream of pale golden blood spurted out, and only then did he recover from his fainting state. Then, Du Xiaofu's shocked gaze saw clearly that in this vast space, above each of the 4 towering mountain peaks, a dazzling ray of light, like divine light, had gathered into a dazzling ball of light. An astonishing aura spread out from within the ball of light. The astonishing sound that came from within the ball of light was even more soul-shaking, like the roars of dragons and tigers, the cries of birds and turtles. Within the ball of light, one could vaguely make out a dazzling rectangular object wrapped in mysterious runes. The astonishing roars of dragons and tigers, the cries of birds and turtles, spread out from within the ball of light. A monstrous, baleful aura swept out, as if it was struggling with all its might, roaring in resistance. However, that astonishing, baleful aura was currently tightly suppressed by the divine light on the 4 towering mountain peaks. No matter how much it struggled, it was unable to break free for a while. However, the 4 towering mountain peaks were also on the verge of collapse at this moment, as if they would not be able to hold on for much longer. What a terrifying aura! Du Xiaoyao's gaze was filled with wariness at this moment, her gaze fixed on the object tightly wrapped within the ball of divine light. The fearless Du Xiaoyao's expression was grave at this moment. Who would have thought that a mere Meridian Spirit Realm practitioner would actually be able to break into my 4 Directions baleful seal? So you are also a dual practitioner of Martial Dao and Talisman Dao. At this moment, an ancient voice rang out. Just as Du Xiaofu was in shock, a figure of cultivation appeared within the dazzling ball of light. Talisman scripts flashed, and a stream of talisman script light instantly swept through the air, landing directly in front of Du Xiaofu and Du Xiaoyao. This was an old man who looked to be in his 50s. His long black hair was draped over his shoulders, and his red robe covered his body. He had a wide forehead and a square face, and his aura was extraordinary. This was especially true for the old man's deep eyes under his thick eyebrows. Flame runes could be faintly seen leaping in the depths of his eyes, causing one to feel as if one had fallen into the magma at the core of the earth. The mental energy in one's mind would be completely incinerated, and one's soul would wither in pain from the burning. The figure of the old man was rather illusory. It was clearly a Yuan spirit body. However, even though it was a Yuan spirit body, the surrounding space was directly distorted. Every move he made seemed to control the world. Every move he made caused the surrounding space to ripple. A terrifying aura vaguely spread, causing Du Xiaofu's body to tremble. What a terrifying aura! It's too strong. At this moment, Du Xiaofu felt a deep sense of powerlessness for the first time when he faced this old man. It was like he was facing the heavens and the earth, and the profound energy within his body was on the verge of stopping while his soul was trembling. He didn't even have the courage to resist this old man. As the old man appeared, his gaze was fixed on Du Xiaoyao, who was beside Du Xiaofu. There was a look of doubt in his eyes, and flame runes constantly flickered in the depths of his eyes. After a while, the old man's expression became extremely shocked. He looked at Du Xiaoyao and exclaimed, "In the universe, there are 5 spirits: heaven, earth, God, human, and ghost. There are also 5 insects: hoe, scale, hair, feather, and kuan. Your macaque is not heaven, earth, God, human, or ghost. It's also not hoe, scale, hair, feather, or kuan. You're one of the 4 monkeys. As a redbone macaque, your origin is even more extraordinary. You understand yin and yang, understand human affairs, and are adept at entering and exiting. No wonder you could enter my 4 directions ominous seal. I never thought that I would be able to see such a naturally revered creature in the dark forest. This guy is really formidable. He actually knows about my origins." Du Xiaoyao was shocked. Her body immediately flew to Du Xiaofu's shoulder, and her gaze was fixed on the old man's body. There was an unprecedented graveness in her eyes. Du Xiaofu's body slightly retreated. He was prepared to think of a way to escape with Du Xiaoyao at any time, but he didn't dare to act blindly without thinking. Faint golden blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Du Xiaofu continuously bit the tip of his tongue, using the sharp pain to keep his mind clear. A terrifying sound was transmitted from the light ball that was tightly locked on the mountain peak. It was constantly shaking people's souls, as if it was trying to destroy their souls. "Kid, don't be nervous. Although your strength is not enough, you have a divine object like the red-bone horse monkey by your side. This proves that you are also a person blessed by the heavens. Being able to enter the 4 directions baleful sky seal proves that you have such an opportunity. There isn't much time left, so I can't explain too much to you. You are also a spirit symbol master. Condense a spiritual furnace, and let me take a look first." As the old man's voice fell, he swept his scarlet gown, and an incorporeal fluctuation of energy was emitted, immediately wrapping Du Xiaofu's body. Afterwards, Du Xiaofu, whose soul was still trembling and his profound energy stagnating, was instantly no longer affected by that overflowing fiendish aura. Du Xiaofu looked at the old man in front of him. After a slight hesitation, he condensed one hand seal after another. Bang! Suddenly, runes spread all over Du Xiaofu's body, before finally condensing into a spiritual furnace and a symbol cauldron. White, green, black, red, and yellow. These 5 kinds of energy radiance soared to the sky, and even a kind of faint golden radiance appeared. Mysterious runes flickered incessantly, and a terrifying aura burst out. 5 elemental runes, an all-round spirit symbol master, an initial spirit symbol master at the 4th star level, but his mental force is far from comparable to others at the same level. It looks like the heavens are treating me well, to be able to send me such a person. Looking at the spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron condensed by Du Xiaofu, the old man in his 50s revealed a look of surprise and even faintly astonishment. Seeing the condensed spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron condensed with 5 kinds of runes, with his eyesight, he naturally knew what this represented. Du Xiaofu looked at the old man in front of him. Withdrawing his hand seals, the spiritual furnace and symbol cauldron turned into dazzling runes and returned to his body. Gathering his courage, he asked the old man, "May I ask if you are senior revered artifact?" "Revered artifact, haha." The old man in his 50s laughed out loud. "It's been a long time since I heard someone call me that. At that time, someone gave me this title. It looks like little brat. You have also come to seek treasures. You are really a revered artifact." Du Xiaofu was shocked as he looked at the 50-something-year-old man in front of him. Although he had already vaguely guessed the identity of this 50-something-year-old man, he still could not help but be deeply shocked when he heard the old man personally admit it. Revered artifact was a super powerhouse whose name shook the whole central continent 1,000 years ago. An 8-star spirit symbol master, dominating the region in terms of refining weapons. He was a terrifying existence equivalent to a martial saint. Greetings, senior revered artifact. After recovering from his shock, Du Xiaofu bowed in the manner of a junior, neither servile nor overbearing, and not lacking in manners. Rumble. At the same time Du Xiaofu bowed, the whole space shook violently, and the four towering mountains were on the verge of collapsing. Divine radiance trembled, and on the surface of the four mountains, cracks immediately appeared. Buzz, buzz. Inside the divine radiance, the rectangular light wrapped by the mysterious runes became more and more dazzling. The roars of dragons, tigers, birds, and turtles became more and more soul-stirring. Wind and thunder rumbled, and ghosts cried and gods howled. Rise, it's too late. There's not much time left. This ominous thing can't be suppressed any longer. The revered artifact looked at Du Xiaofu, and a dignified expression appeared in his eyes. He looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "Little brat, what's your name? How old are you?" Little brat, Du Xiaofu, almost 17 years old. Du Xiaofu felt the aura of the revered artifact. Although the aura was oppressive, it wasn't harmful to him, so he relaxed a little. 17 years old, 4-star spirit symbol master, pulse spiritual realm cultivation. You're quite talented. There seems to be something special about you. The revered artifact looked at Du Xiaofu, and then said, Du Xiaofu, let me ask you, are you willing to be my disciple? What? Du Xiaofu immediately stared at the revered artifact in front of him. He felt that this super expert, who had been famous in the Central Plains for thousands of years, shouldn't be a bad person. As the saying goes, one's appearance is determined by one's heart. Looking at his majestic appearance, he didn't seem like an evil person. After a short pause, he asked, Senior, you want me to be your disciple? If I become your disciple, there won't be any special rules, right? Also, if you have something important to ask me to do, I'm afraid it's difficult for me to take on such a big responsibility. After saying this, Du Xiaofu continued to look at the revered artifact's expression. Although Du Xiaofu's words were extremely tactful, the meaning was very clear. If the revered artifact asked him to do something special, or something that was against his will or beyond his ability, he wouldn't do it. Hearing Du Xiaofu's words, the revered artifact couldn't help but be stunned. If he, the revered artifact, had said that he wanted to recruit a disciple, not to mention the Central Plains, even the whole continent, would have flocked to him and given everything to be his disciple. But now, this little brat wanted to make it clear. He was afraid that he would suffer a big loss, or else he wouldn't be willing to be his disciple. Chapter 340. You little rascal, you're quite clever. That's not bad. Being a little clever is naturally better than being a little stupid. You'll also avoid being taken advantage of in the future. The venerable weapon gently shook his head and comforted himself. Then, he said to Du Xiaofu, time is short, and I don't have time to test your temperament. With the red-bone horse monkey by your side, I'm afraid you won't be an evil person. After pausing for a moment, the venerable weapon continued to speak to Du Xiaofu. You can also rest assured. You won't lose out if you acknowledge me as your master. Although I've taken in a few nominal disciples in my life, none of them have received my true teachings. It's not that I don't teach them, but those nominal disciples either lack talent or have bad temperaments, so they couldn't receive my true teachings. Since you've become my disciple, of course you'll receive my true teachings. However, how much you can achieve in the future will depend on yourself. Hearing the venerable weapon's words, Du Xiaofu immediately knelt on the ground without hesitation. After kowtowing 3 times, he looked up at the venerable weapon with great respect and said, Disciple Du Xiaofu pays his respects to Master. Everything is simple. Rise and rise. From now on, you're my disciple. Seeing Du Xiaofu bow respectfully, the venerable weapon's face revealed a satisfied smile. However, his gaze immediately turned serious. Rumble. As the venerable weapon finished speaking, the 4 towering mountains behind him shook again, and cracks appeared on the surface of the mountains. You're already a primordial spirit body. You can't trap me. It's been 1,300 years. You can't trap me anymore. Within the ball of light, The mysterious runes of the talisman bloomed endlessly. A shocking roar came out. The roar was like thunder, shaking the 4 towering mountains. For huge rays of divine light trembled, and a ferocious and terrifying aura surged wildly. "Master, what's in there?" Du Xiaofu's eyes trembled as he looked at the ball of light. At that moment, the ball of light formed by the divine light seemed to be on the verge of collapsing, as if the monstrous beast was about to break free. The venerable weapon looked back at the object suppressed by the 4 mountains behind him, and then looked at Du Xiaofu. His deep eyes slightly narrowed, revealing a deep and dignified look. He said, "That is the magic weapon that I have refined. 1,500 years ago, I got a meteorite from outer space. I thought it was a divine material for refining weapons, so I prepared it for 200 years. With the azure dragon scale, white tiger bone, phoenix feather, and black tortoise shell as supplements, I wanted to refine a peerless magic weapon." Oh my God! Du Xiaofu could not help but gasp when he heard this. The azure dragon scale, white tiger bone, phoenix feather, black tortoise shell, azure dragon, white tiger, phoenix, and black tortoise were the 4 terrifying beasts that ranked in the top 10 on the heavenly beast list. When Big Brother Jin Qingchun mentioned the heavenly beast list, he specifically mentioned that the strongest demonic beasts on the list were the azure dragon, white tiger, phoenix, and black tortoise. They were all top existences, equivalent to the king of monsters. Any one of them had the power to command all other beasts. However, his master, the venerable weapon, wanted to use the azure dragon scale, white tiger bone, phoenix feather, and black tortoise shell as supplements to refine a peerless magic weapon. In this world, how many people could do this, and how many people dared to do this? The venerable weapon paused for a moment, looked at Du Xiaofu, and his eyes became more and more dignified. He said, "Just when I was about to refine this peerless magic weapon, an unexpected accident happened. In the meteorite of unknown origin, a divine evil spirit appeared. Just when the magic weapon was about to be completed, the divine evil spirit woke up and merged with the azure dragon scale, white tiger bone, phoenix feather, and black tortoise shell. With the power of the 4 beasts, the divine evil spirit became the soul of the magic weapon, and its power was not much lower than mine. At that time, I knew that all the problems were because of the meteorite. I don't know where the meteorite came from, but there was a divine evil spirit sealed inside. Because of my refinement, the divine evil spirit was able to see the light of day again. After merging with the azure dragon scale, white tiger bone, phoenix feather, and black tortoise shell, it became even more terrifying. If it was allowed to grow, with the character of the divine evil spirit, it would definitely bring disaster to the world, and blood would flow like rivers. The more creatures it killed, the stronger it would become. At that time, no one would be able to subdue it. Even if someone could subdue it, their mind would be corroded, and they would be controlled by the divine evil spirit instead, becoming its slave. Taking advantage of the fact that the divine evil spirit had just become the soul of the magic weapon and was not too strong, I was able to barely suppress it with all my strength. I wanted to find a way to destroy it in the future, so that the peerless magic weapon would not bring disaster to the world and blood would flow like rivers. Who would have thought that when the news that I had refined a peerless magic weapon spread out, a good friend of mine suddenly attacked me when I was in a weakened state. Without any other choice, I had to abandon my physical body and enter the magic weapon with my primordial spirit. Fortunately, before I refined the magic weapon, I was worried that something would happen. I was afraid that if there was an accident, I would have a place to go. This seal was set up at that time, but I didn't expect that it would be used on the magic weapon in the end. Unfortunately, after 1,300 years, the 4 Directions Divine Evil Seal can no longer suppress the magic weapon. After saying all of this in one breath, the venerable weapon looked at Du Xiaofu with a dignified expression and said, 1,300 years, even though the magic weapon was suppressed by my 4 Directions Divine Evil Seal, during this 1,300 years, the magic weapon's soul, the divine evil spirit, had completely fused with the weapon and became a living creature. Now, if this magic weapon were to escape, it would be enough to bring disaster to the world. At that time, Not to mention that the entire central continent would be bathed in blood. If it were to be obtained by someone with evil intentions, they would join forces. I'm afraid no one in the world would be able to resist them. Cuckoo. Upon hearing this, Du Xiaofu was dumbfounded and then gasped after hearing his venerable weapon say so much in one breath. It was rumored that Master Revered Weapon had failed in refining a peerless divine weapon. It was true. However, Master Revered Weapon could only be considered as a half-failure. He had only refined a peerless divine weapon into a peerless lethal weapon. You can't trap me. You can't trap me anymore. Inside the light ball, there was an astonishing roar. The dazzling, mysterious runes soared into the sky, and the power of the magic weapon intensified like a volcanic eruption. Buzz buzz. Inside the light ball, there were bursts of wind and thunder, and the cries of ghosts and gods were like the roars of gods and demons. The terrifying aura of the magic weapon swept out. Bang, 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 bang. For energy, sonic booms exploded like thunder. The 4 towering mountains shook violently and finally could not help but explode. Boom, boom, boom. The 4 astonishing mountains collapsed and collapsed with terrifying power. It was as if the world was about to be destroyed, and it made people feel like they were about to be destroyed. However, the collapse of the 4 astonishingly huge mountains did not turn into countless boulders. Instead, it turned into monstrous runes that shattered into pieces. Whoosh! The dazzling runes came one after another and covered this part of the world. It was as if there was a torrential rune storm in this part of the world. The entire world was trembling violently, swaying as if it was about to destroy and overturn this sealed space. Boom, boom, boom. At the same time, in the outside world, in the sealed land, the mountains collapsed and the earth cracked. The ground shook violently as if there was an earthquake. A terrifying aura descended upon the entire space, making people's souls tremble. What's going on? Is the real Venerable Weapons Cave abode born? Is the sealed land about to be destroyed? Countless people were shocked and uneasy, but no one knew what was going on. At this time, the people in the outside world did not know that the Venerable Weapons Cave abode that they had worked so hard to find had been secretly entered by Du Xiaofu and Du Xiaoyao. The Venerable Weapon, who had shocked the entire Central Plains 1,000 years ago, had taken Du Xiaofu as his disciple. Bang bang. As the 4 mountains within the 4 directions Heaven Fiend Seal crumbled into runes that filled the sky, the 4 beams of light that were as dazzling as divine light also crumbled and broke apart. Finally, the huge rune light sphere also began to crack. You can't trap me. Haha, you can't trap me. The roar resounded, and the wind and thunder rumbled. The light cluster was completely shattered, and the runes in the sky were shattered. The rune light screen was dazzling like fireworks. An extremely terrifying aura, as if it came from the 9 serenities, from the realm of demons. The ferocious aura rushed to the world and collapsed the sky. Whoosh! At this time, the space between heaven and earth trembled. Within the light cluster, the dazzling rune appeared. At the same time, the rune with a purple and gold color emitted a dazzling light, forming a purple and gold space vortex. Boom! Within the purple and gold vortex, the ferocious aura swept out like a hurricane. The light was dazzling, containing the power of the dragon and tiger and the martial chi of the phoenix. It was so dazzling that people could not look directly at it. Under the dazzling light, Du Xiaofu stared at the sky. At this time, if it were not for his master, the Venerable Weapon, protecting him, his soul would have been shattered by the ferocious aura. Under the dazzling light, Du Xiaofu was finally able to faintly see the appearance of a peerless weapon. Rumble. As the peerless weapon was revealed, the world shook. The talisman blossomed and expanded. A terrifying fiendish aura frantically rippled, devouring the surrounding energy of the world. It frantically absorbed the energy of the world in this space. Under this crazy absorption, Du Xiaofu, who was protected by his master, the Venerable Weapon, also felt that the chi in his body was about to be swallowed by the purple and gold vortex. Today's update is complete. Chapter 341. Translator. H2DH2 Mister in the middle of the terrifying vortex, a broadsword half the height of a person appeared. Boom! Around the broadsword, the space vibrated. The talisman pattern shone brightly, absorbing all the energy of heaven and earth in a frenzy. As the purple-gold light bloomed, the broadsword looked like the god of all weapons, peerless in the sky. Du Xiaofu's gaze was fixed on the broadsword. It was much longer and wider than ordinary swords. The tip of the sword was slightly sharper, and from the hilt to the hilt, it was 2 palms wide. From the 2 sides of the hilt, there was a perfect arc of secret patterns that extended to the middle of the sword, like the wings of a phoenix that wanted to spread its wings and soar into the sky. The sword was purple-gold in color, with the bones of a tiger in the shape of a dragon. On one side, there was a green dragon pattern, and on the other, there was a black tortoise pattern. The faint roar of a dragon and tortoise could be heard, as if the green dragon was soaring into the sky and the black tortoise was entrenched. The hilt of the sword was in the shape of a tiger beast. It roared ferociously, as if it was about to pounce. It was inexplicably shocking. Buzz buzz. The peerless weapon roared, the dragon roared, the tiger roared, the sparrow and the tortoise cried. Amidst the dazzling talisman patterns on the sword, there was a sky full of dazzling talisman light. The faint shadow of a green dragon soared into the sky, the shadow of a white tiger entrenched, the shadow of a phoenix flapped its wings, and the shadow of a black tortoise suppressed the heaven and earth. Such a peerless weapon, floating in the air, was like a peerless demon god that had awakened, overlooking the heaven and earth, enough to destroy everything. Is this the peerless weapon? Du Xiaofu was shocked. At this moment, even with the protection of his master, the revered weapon, looking at the peerless weapon made his soul feel like it was about to wither and be destroyed. So strong, too strong. Du Xiaoyao was also shocked. That terrifying aura made her pale golden spirit eyes filled with absolute fear. It was originally a peerless weapon, the heavenly palace of purple gold, but now it has become a peerless weapon. If this item is born, the entire world will be filled with cries. At that time, blood will flow like rivers. This item shouldn't have been refined. I'm afraid I have suffered the wrath of the heavens for ending up like this. Looking at the peerless weapon, the weapon's sovereign sighed. His expression was extremely solemn. Du Xiaoyao, aren't you able to devour all spiritual weapons? Can you devour that sword? Du Xiaofu immediately asked Du Xiaoyao, who was on his shoulder. At this moment, he had placed a lot of hope on Du Xiaoyao. I feel that the murderous weapon wants to devour me. It's too strong. If I become stronger, I won't be afraid of it. But now, I can't. I feel that I can't devour it. Du Xiaoyao was full of fear. Facing that peerless weapon, she felt that she couldn't devour it at all. Now, she could only be afraid. Although the red-bone horse-ape is strong and its body can devour all spiritual weapons, the heavenly palace of purple gold is made of the meteorite that trapped the divine evil spirit. Together with the azure dragon's scales, the white tiger's bones, the phoenix's feathers, and the black tortoise's shell, it can't be devoured or destroyed. Now that the divine evil spirit has become the soul of this weapon, it's even more difficult to deal with, said the weapon sovereign. I've already escaped. No one can trap me anymore. Only by killing you and obtaining your primordial spirit can I reach the most perfect and strongest state. Above the peerless, murderous weapon, the heavenly palace of purple gold was dazzling like the sun. No one dared to look directly at it. A looming shadow of a head appeared in the sky, like the head of a fiend god. A monstrous evil spirit swept out and tightly locked onto the weapon's sovereign. Occasionally, one could see the shadow of a dragon, the crouching tiger, and the posture of a phoenix in the dazzling light. Du Xiaofu, my disciple. Now, there's only one way to suppress this peerless murderous weapon, and I can't do it alone. Even if you join in, I'm afraid there's no chance. But with the red-bone horse-ape, there's a little more chance of success. It seems that there's God's will in the unseen world. The weapon's sovereign looked at the terrifying head of the fiend god, spreading out from the peerless murderous weapon, and immediately turned back to speak to Du Xiaofu seriously. Master, what's the way? Du Xiaofu asked. The weapon's sovereign squinted his deep eyes, revealing an indescribably overbearing aura. He said, "This peerless murderous weapon can escape, but after all, it's made by me. It's not easy to get out of my hands. I'll enter the weapon with the power of my primordial spirit to suppress the weapon's soul. The redbone horseape beside you will assist in suppressing the weapon's body. Together with my suppression, it should be enough." "Master, what should I do?" Du Xiaofu asked the weapon sovereign. The weapon sovereign looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "You're the most important. After the redbone horseape and I suppress the weapon's body and soul, you'll drip your blood on the weapon to recognize it as its master. Then, you'll place a soul mark on it and cultivate a new weapon spirit. That's all we can do for now. Once the weapon spirit strengthens and destroys the weapon soul, the peerless weapon will reappear. But this is also a delaying tactic. The chance of success is very slim." Then, the weapon sovereign looked at Du Xiaofu and said in a deep voice, "Although this is a delaying tactic, it can only succeed. If it fails, you, me, and the redbone horseape will not only disappear, but this peerless weapon is made by me. If it obtains my primordial spirit, it will reach its strongest state. At that time, I'm afraid that no one will be able to control it. Plus, with the redbone horseape's body, it'll be like adding wings to a tiger. Once it reaches its peak, no one in this world will be able to suppress it." Phew! Hearing this, Du Xiaofu sucked in a breath of cold air. If he succeeded, although he would be able to obtain this peerless weapon, it would be equivalent to carrying a ticking time bomb by his side. However, if he failed, he would directly turn into ashes. And at this moment, there was no other way. "Du Xiaoyao, what about you? Do you want to help us?" Du Xiaofu asked Du Xiaoyao. Although Du Xiaoyao was following him, he had no right to decide for Du Xiaoyao in such a dangerous situation. "I have no choice but to help. That terrifying weapon seems to have sealed the space inside. I can't get out." Du Xiaoyao had a helpless look on his face as he sensed the qi in this space. The space was frozen, sealed, and solidified by the monstrous murderous qi outside the protection of the venerable artifact. That qi was extremely strange, and even Du Xiaoyao would find it difficult to escape. "Master, let's do it." Hearing Du Xiaoyao's words, Du Xiaofu immediately said to the weapon sovereign, "You only have 3 days. You must succeed in 3 days. The space inside the four-sided ominous seal can hold for 3 more days at most. In the whole central province, few people can sense the four-sided ominous seal that I set up. But this place will collapse in 3 days at most. At that time, if we can't suppress this peerless weapon, it will be exposed. Maybe at this time, many experts of the central province will come. Once the peerless weapon appears, we can't suppress it anymore." The weapon sovereign told Du Xiaofu, "You can't do anything to me. Go to hell." In mid-air, the head of the terrifying demon god that had transformed from the peerless weapon let out a loud cry. Then, a ray of sword light shot out from its mouth towards the primordial spirit of venerable weapon. The moment the sword light appeared, ghosts cried and gods howled. It drew a thunderous purple-gold light in mid-air. It was like a purple-gold thunderbolt. It was ferocious and destructive. It instantly appeared in front of venerable weapon. "How dare you, evil spirit? You're not strong enough now." The weapon sovereign shouted and waved his hand. A talisman energy swept across the sky and blocked the sword light. Boom! The two energies collided fiercely. The space rumbled and trembled as if it was going to turn the world upside down. The dazzling light spread out like a hurricane. Du Xiaofu's pupils constricted as he saw a terrifying scene appear in the sky as his master, the revered weapon, and the head of the gods and demons attacked. Countless cracks appeared in the space. This level of strength was beyond his imagination. Is this the power of the primordial spirit of an 8-star spiritual talisman master? Du Xiaofu was shocked as he looked at such a terrifying scene. Even if a martial king were to face an 8-star spirit talisman master, he would probably be smacked to death with just a wave of his hand. Woo, woo. At the same time, the terrifying energy spread out. The huge head of the divine demon roared and finally dissipated into dazzling talisman light. Xiaofu, get ready to suppress the murderous weapon. Seeing this, the revered weapon let out a soft cry. His primordial spirit body was wrapped in a supreme light and was tightly wrapped by runes. Then, it turned into a divine light and swept across the sky like a bolt of lightning. It directly plunged into the peerless weapon that was suspended in midair. Chapter 342. As the primordial spirit of the weapon revered plunged into the murderous weapon, the weapon suddenly trembled, and the surrounding dazzling talisman patterns also dimmed. As the primordial spirit of the weapon revered entered the murderous weapon, without the protection of the weapon revered, the terrifying murderous aura that spread from the murderous weapon immediately made Du Xiaofu shudder. His chi stagnated, and his soul throbbed. Fortunately, as the weapon revered entered the murderous weapon, more than half of the terrifying murderous aura that spread from the weapon dissipated. Otherwise, just the faint aura of this terrifying fiendish chi would be enough to suppress and destroy Du Xiaofu. You came to me of your own accord. You can't deal with me. Within the murderous weapon, there was a faint roar. Boom. Then, the murderous weapon trembled violently, and the surrounding space was completely distorted. It was as if there was a terrifying energy that was about to erupt like a volcano, but it was constantly suppressed by an invisible force. I'm going to help. Be careful. Du Xiaoyao looked at the ultimate ferocious weapon. The talisman symbols around his body flickered in a dazzling manner after his words sounded. The mountain peak itself floated out, after which, it turned into a huge body that was dozens of feet in size. It rushed through the air and heavily smashed onto the ultimate ferocious weapon. Crash! In an instant, endless dazzling light burst out from Du Xiaoyao's mountain. The talisman patterns were incomparably dazzling, like a sun in the sky. The power made the entire space tremble violently, as if it wanted to suppress and destroy this space. Then, Du Xiaoyao's mountain body directly collapsed, and the murderous weapon, which was already immovable, suddenly became completely immovable. How can there be such an existence? The heavens are really helping me. If I can get it to merge with my body, then no one can do anything to me. Although the murderous weapon was suppressed to the point that it could not move, its voice was filled with greed. Then, the sword body, which was suppressed to the point that it could not move, also began to change and expand in an instant. The talisman patterns flickered brightly, and in an instant, it turned into an astonishing volume of several hundred feet, much larger than Du Xiaoyao's body. On the murderous weapon, the murderous aura became more and more terrifying, trying to break free from the suppression of Du Xiaoyao's body. Halala! The golden talisman patterns on Du Xiaoyao's body were released like lightning. Dazzling light poured down in torrents, and there was a strong fluctuation spreading out like a storm. Finally, the peerless murderous weapon was once again suppressed and immobilized. We can only succeed, not fail. Do it. Du Xiaofu gritted his teeth and flew out. Then, he landed directly on the huge peerless weapon. Chilala. Du Xiaofu quickly bit his index finger, and a few drops of pale golden blood dripped onto the peerless weapon and then disappeared. As the blood dripped into the murderous weapon, Du Xiaofu immediately felt a strange connection with the murderous weapon. Foolish human, do you think I'm so easy to deal with? With your puny cultivation at the pulse spirit realm, you won't be able to withstand a single blow. Laughable, truly laughable. Just as Du Xiaofu's figure landed on the murderous weapon and dripped his blood to recognize it as its master, a sinister and cold laughter came from within the weapon. Suddenly, mysterious runes spread out from the body of the peerless weapon. Just as Du Xiaofu was about to arrange a soul imprint to cultivate a new device spirit, a huge illusory image of a green dragon suddenly spread out from the peerless weapon, as if it was a real object. Roar! The azure dragon roared with unparalleled majesty. Its huge eyes locked onto Du Xiaofu, and an awe-inspiring pressure suddenly boiled, covering the sky and covering the earth, causing Du Xiaofu to tremble. The azure dragon's power was overwhelming, and it was not something that an ordinary person could resist. Just the dragon's roar alone was enough to destroy Du Xiaofu's soul. In an instant, Du Xiaofu was attacked by the huge azure dragon shadow. The profound chi in his body stagnated, and his soul also suffered a huge impact. He could not help but faint. Roar! The head of the azure dragon shadow roared, and a terrifying aura burst out from its mouth. After that, it directly enveloped Du Xiaofu and wanted to swallow the fainted Du Xiaofu into its mouth. Walala! In a flash, a light golden talisman pattern flowed within the body of the fainted Du Xiaofu. In an instant, multicolored light flickered, and numerous light golden talisman patterns lined up and condensed on his back. A pair of glittering talisman wings spread out. Boom! At this moment, a terrifying aura suddenly swept out from Du Xiaofu's body. The talisman wings on his back flapped, and light overflowed and filled the air. It was as if a rock had spread its wings and soared into the sky. It was as if a real golden-winged rock had descended. All of a sudden, the azure dragon shadow sensed the aura of the golden-winged rock that suddenly erupted from Du Xiaofu's body. Its entire body trembled, and the huge shadow's eyes seemed to have sensed something. There was a faint hint of fear in them. Du Xiaofu stared at the huge azure dragon shadow. Just as he was about to faint from the pressure, he activated the rock descends to the 9 heavens. It carried the domineering will of the golden-winged rock clan and resisted the huge pressure of the azure dragon shadow. How is this possible? Why aren't you a human? How can you be a beast? A surprised voice came from within the peerless, murderous weapon. Rock descends to the 9 heavens. Suppress. Du Xiaofu shouted loudly, and the talisman wings on his back flapped. They opened and closed, domineering and fierce. Golden multicolored light bloomed all over the sky, and the majestic light filled the air. The momentum was terrifying. It carried the domineering will of the golden-winged rock clan, and it directly swept towards the azure dragon shadow. All of a sudden, a domineering and terrifying aura surged from Du Xiaofu's body. It flapped its wings and swept across the sky, suppressing the azure dragon shadow with great force. Rumble! The golden-winged rock collided with the azure dragon, and a series of talisman lights shot out like gorgeous fireworks. They bloomed resplendently, and the energy swept across the sky. The terrifying azure dragon shadow was also suppressed and destroyed by Du Xiaofu's rock descends to the 9 heavens. Roar! In just a short moment, the broken talisman of the azure dragon shadow that had just been suppressed and destroyed was directly restored in an instant, and the complete azure dragon shadow condensed again. Roar! Coo! At the same time, the tiger roared, the sparrow and the turtle cried. Beside the azure dragon shadow, the white tiger shadow, the phoenix shadow, and the black tortoise shadow appeared. The 4 beast shadows roared, and the astonishing pressure became even more terrifying. Even with the protection of the golden-winged rock's aura, Du Xiaofu found it difficult to resist. And this might be because the weapon venerable was already suppressing the murderous weapon soul, so the pressure of the 4 beast shadows had been greatly reduced. Otherwise, even with the protection of the golden-winged rock's aura, Du Xiaofu would not be able to resist this kind of aura. Boom, 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 boom. Suddenly, dazzling golden rays of light fell from the sky. In the blink of an eye, golden mountains wrapped in mysterious runes crushed the azure dragon, white tiger, phoenix, black tortoise, and black tortoise phantoms. Roar, roar! Under the suppression of the 4 mountains, the 4 golden talisman patterns roared and struggled, but no matter how hard they tried, they could not break free. Du Xiaofu narrowed his eyes and looked over. He saw that the 4 mountains wrapped in mysterious golden talisman patterns were the 4 mountains separated from the 5 mountains above Du Xiaoyao's body. Although the 4 mountains were separated, the golden talisman patterns were connected. They seemed to be one, but they were not separated. They tightly suppressed the azure dragon, white tiger, phoenix, and the black tortoise shadow. I'll suppress them. You go and do your thing as soon as possible. Otherwise, I'm afraid I can't suppress them for long. Du Xiaoyao's voice came out. Hearing this, Du Xiaofu's golden talisman wings disappeared. Then, he sat cross-legged on the murderous weapon and formed a handprint. His whole body was shrouded in a white light like a divine light. After a short time, a strand of rune-like energy suddenly swept out from between his eyebrows and spread into the murderous weapon. Du Xiaofu, my disciple, come in and set up the soul imprint to cultivate a new device spirit, The weapon master's voice came into Du Xiaofu's ears in a rather strange way. At this moment, Du Xiaofu seemed to have been connected with the murderous weapon, as if they had become one. All of a sudden, Du Xiaofu sensed that his mental power had appeared in a vast ominous space. Clatter. In the ominous space, the primordial spirit of his master, the weapon master, turned into a giant. His body was wrapped in dazzling talisman patterns, like chains of talisman patterns, which trapped a horrible celestial demon phantom like a prisoner. The celestial demon phantom was like a celestial demon, roaring ferociously as if it should not exist in this world. Its mighty aura was terrible, and its whole body was like a primordial spirit. Master, how should I set up the soul imprint to cultivate a new device spirit? Du Xiaofu asked. This is the murderous weapon space. The soul of the murderous weapon has been trapped by me. You set up the soul imprint here, and use your spiritual power to condense a new device spirit in 3 days. When the time comes to cultivate the device spirit to fight for the control of the murderous weapon, you still have a chance. During this period of time, I will use the primordial spirit forbidden secret technique to seal the soul of the ferocious weapon, but I'm afraid that I won't be able to trap the soul of the ferocious weapon for long. When I'm unable to seal the soul of the ferocious weapon, if the artifact spirit you nurtured is unable to defeat the soul of the ferocious weapon, then everything will repeat itself. The weapon master's voice came into Du Xiaofu's ears. He said, Xiaofu, my disciple, during this time, I have something important to ask you to do. It's related to my life. Although you are not strong, I have no one to rely on and no one to trust, so I can only ask you to do it. Brothers, forgive me for only being able to finish the second watch today. Tomorrow is the festival, so I rushed back to my hometown to celebrate with my family. Today, I was tired from traveling all day. I just got home and finished the second watch, so I can't finish the third watch today. Please forgive me. I also wish all my readers a happy Mid-Autumn Festival, a happy family, and good health. Chapter 343. Back then, when the news of me forging a peerless weapon spread, a good friend suddenly attacked me when I was weak. I had no choice but to abandon my physical body and enter the weapon with my primordial spirit and come to the dark forest. All these years, my primordial spirit can still feel that my physical body is intact. This is probably because he was afraid of failure and trapped my physical body as a hostage. Perhaps he also hoped that I could exchange a peerless divine weapon for my physical body. If you can obtain my physical body before I can no longer suppress the soul of the weapon, then I will have a chance to recover. Master, where is your physical body now? Du Xiaofu asked. The 7-star hall, more than 1,300 years ago. I am not sure about the current situation in the 7-star hall. The 7-star hall is very powerful, and each has its own way of doing things. If the 7-star hall joins forces, it is enough to become one of the top forces in the Central Plains. The person who attacked me back then was the Lord of the Alioth Hall. If you have the chance, go to the Central Plains and settle down in the Migres Palace first. Wait for an opportunity to find my physical body. Although I was the Lord of the Migres Palace back then, time is limited, so I can't tell you too much about the 7-star hall. You will naturally understand when the time comes. After you enter the Migres Palace, don't expose your relationship with me first, and don't easily trust anyone in the 7-star hall. However, no one has seen the heavenly palace of purple gold yet, so you don't have to be afraid of being exposed. If you really need help, you can go to the Lord of the Merak Palace, but don't trust him completely. You can't let your guard down. The 7-star hall is full of experts, so be careful. The voice of the venerable weapon continued to fall into Du Xiaofu's ears. I will seal the soul of the weapon with my primordial spirit now. You can begin to arrange the soul imprint and cultivate a new weapon spirit. Whoosh! As the venerable weapon's voice fell, the huge primordial spirit's hand seals condensed. The dazzling rune chains formed by the runes suddenly began to tighten and tighten, constantly tightening into the body of the terrifying fiend god phantom. Woo woo! The fiend god body roared ferociously like a fiend god. Its mighty aura rippled with a terrifying fluctuation. It kept bursting with a violent, murderous aura that seemed to be able to corrode the rune chains set up by the revered artifact. You were refined by me. Don't be so arrogant in front of me. If you want to leave, I won't allow you to. With a shout, the huge primordial spirit of Weapon Master suddenly began to transform into a dazzling ray of light, like a divine ray descending from the heavens, and finally swept into the formation chains. ZZ, the strands of talisman markings were linked together like bolts of lightning, and they emanated dazzling radiance. In the end, they connected with each other and intersected in a crisscrossed manner as they evolved, and they were accompanied by a mysterious and taboo energy fluctuation. Boo-hoo! The phantoms of fiend gods roared without end, and they were peerlessly ferocious and monstrous. However, they were suppressed to the point of being unable to move under the fluctuations of that mysterious and taboo energy. The crisscrossed, dazzling rune chains tightly imprisoned the phantoms of fiend gods. Finally, they converged into a rusty imperial suppression seal and directly swept into the phantoms of fiend gods. You won't be able to suppress me for long. You won't be able to suppress me for long. It won't be long before I come out. The phantoms of fiend gods roared and struggled, and their eyes were filled with unwillingness and resistance. However, in the end, they were powerless to close their eyes. The terrifying and murderous aura on them disappeared, and everything began to calm down. Set up the soul imprint. Du Xiaofu came to his senses and immediately began to set up the soul imprint. He was ready to cultivate a new device spirit with his spiritual soul power. Although he did not know much about refining weapons, it was not too difficult. Du Xiaofu was no longer the foolish young master in the Stone City. In the following time, Du Xiaofu concentrated on setting up the soul imprint and condensing a new device spirit. During this process, Du Xiaofu did not dare to be careless. Once he made a mistake, the consequences would be unimaginable. As time passed, the sealed land in the outside world became more and more lively. Many puppets, spirit weapons, and practitioner weapons appeared, causing a series of fights in the sealed land. Countless people died, but there were still more and more treasure hunters and adventurers who joined in regardless of the cost. However, no one had found the real revered weapon cave mansion. The entire sealed land had been dug 3 feet deep, but there was still no harvest. Many unfamiliar experts also entered the sealed land. Experts from several surrounding empires also continued to pour in. In the end, it was said that many Martial King realm experts of the Stone Dragon Empire also joined in. In the sealed land, there were many experts, and fierce battles between Martial King realm experts occurred from time to time. The Martial King realm experts' attacks were earth-shattering, and earth-shattering, which was amazing. For those who did not obtain any treasures, it was not a waste to have the opportunity to see a battle between Martial King realm experts. 3 days later, in the murderous weapon space, a baby-sized rune imprint was connected to the entire space. Its aura fluctuated, as if it was also awakening its life essence. The device spirit has been born. Great success. The peerless murderous weapon now belongs to you. The spirit of the murderous weapon has been suppressed by me, and its power is not as strong as before. But remember not to activate it rashly, so as to avoid affecting the seal and awakening the spirit of the murderous weapon in advance. Although the spirit of the murderous weapon has been suppressed, the remaining power of the weapon is still there. This is very troublesome, but I see that your cultivation method seems to be related to the golden-winged rocks. The golden-winged rocks are extraordinary, and the real rocks are divine creatures. So, you can temporarily carry the murderous weapon with you, and use the aura of the golden-winged rocks to suppress the remaining power. When the new device spirit is stabilized, you can put it into the celestial watchtower and cultivate the device spirit to suppress the spirit of the murderous weapon. At this moment, the voice of the venerable weapon sounded in Du Xiaofu's ears again. Although you are now my disciple, I can't give you too much. I can only give you what I have learned in my life, and I can't teach you personally. In the end, how much you can comprehend depends on your own luck and talent. As for the purple-gold celestial watchtower, whether you get a blessing or a misfortune depends on your own luck. If there is a day when we meet again, we will talk again. As the voice fell, a dazzling light flashed, like thunder, accompanied by a shocking energy fluctuation, suddenly rushed into Du Xiaofu's mind. Walala! As Du Xiaofu's soul trembled, the dazzling light of energy shattered into pieces inch by inch. Waves of powerful energy rushed into his mind, causing his soul to swell, and he almost lost consciousness. While he was in a daze, a huge amount of information suddenly appeared in Du Xiaofu's mind. This information was all related to refining weapons, refining various puppets, various spiritual weapons, and even a lot of information about talisman formations. A large amount of information bloomed in Du Xiaofu's mind like dazzling runes. In the end, it seemed to have completely integrated into Du Xiaofu's mind, causing an unprecedented swelling pain in Du Xiaofu's mind, as if his mind was about to explode. This information was branded in his mind and could not be removed, becoming a part of Du Xiaofu's mind. Several hours later, on top of the peerless weapon, Du Xiaoyao's original body disappeared. The phantoms of the Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Phoenix, Black Tortoise, and Black Tortoise all disappeared. Only Du Xiaofu sat cross-legged on top of the enormous peerless weapon floating horizontally. His entire body was enveloped in dazzling white divine light. Phew! After a while, the white light around Du Xiaofu's body disappeared. After exhaling a mouthful of turbid air, he opened his eyes with a deep look. Withdraw. His body jumped down from the purple-gold celestial watchtower. With a slight thought, the huge purple-gold celestial watchtower immediately shrank and then returned to its original size, falling in front of Du Xiaofu. Chapter 344. Wang. The purple-gold heavenly tower stood in front of Du Xiaofu. It was half the height of Du Xiaofu and emitted a thunderous sound. The ferocious aura was nowhere to be seen. All that was left was an extremely cool broadsword. The nimble curve of the sword was natural. The purple-gold heavenly tower was like a tiger bone and a dragon bone. It was like a phoenix facing the sun or a divine turtle crouching down. Anyone who saw it would feel their heart race. A peerless divine weapon, a peerless sword. Du Xiaofu reached out and held the peerless divine weapon in front of him. Even though the soul of the murderous weapon had been suppressed, it still made people palpitate with excitement. The aura that faintly spread out from the sword was definitely not something that an ordinary practitioner weapon could compare with. So heavy. Just as Du Xiaofu held the purple-gold heavenly tower, it felt as if it weighed thousands of kilograms and fell down. Du Xiaofu didn't pay attention to the exalted god, and the purple-gold heavenly tower fell to the ground. Ka-ka. When the sword struck the rock, the entire rock instantly shattered into pieces. Then, the sword stabbed into the hard rock ground, causing the entire ground to tremble with a loud rumble. What an extraordinary divine weapon! Du Xiaoyao's little macaque body jumped onto Du Xiaofu's shoulder. Her pale golden eyes looked at the purple-gold heavenly palace in surprise. Are you okay? Du Xiaofu looked at Du Xiaoyao, and his expression suddenly changed quite a bit. At this moment, Du Xiaoyao's face was pale, and her aura was extremely weak. She seemed extremely dispirited. I used all my strength to suppress this weapon. I used up a lot of energy, but it's not a big deal. I just need some time to recover. Du Xiaoyao looked around and then said to Du Xiaofu, I feel like this space is about to collapse. I'll send you out first. It was quiet in the valley. Hua Fankong paced back and forth, looking at the corpses not far away. These corpses belonged to many adventurers and treasure hunters who had entered the sealed land during the past 3 days. They were mercilessly killed by Yi Piaoling and Hua Fankong. Why haven't they come out yet? Did something happen? Hua Fankong paced back and forth and finally walked behind Yi Piaoling. His gaze fell on the serene python in Yi Piaoling's hand. The shocking aura was spreading. It was definitely not an ordinary treasure. Yi Piaoling sat cross-legged on a rock and gently wiped the serene python. She didn't look back and said, If you want to leave, you can leave any time. I didn't mean that. Since I have decided to follow you, I won't leave first. I will. Hua Fankong. I'm a man of my word. Hua Fankong patted his chest and said, as the leader of a gang, he was definitely famous in the dark forest. However, he was extremely respectful in front of Yi Piaoling. On one hand, It was because the black-robed youth had saved his life twice. On the other hand, Hua Fankong was not stupid. He knew that both Yi Piaoling and Du Xiaofu were not simple. Although they were young, they were stronger than him. In this special period, he would not be at a disadvantage if he followed them. Chi, just as Hua Fankong's voice trailed off, ripples suddenly appeared on the stone wall. Next, a golden light spread out, and the silhouette of a five-fingered mountain appeared before the two of them. I'm very weak right now. Plus, I swallowed a talisman weapon and many other things. I need some time to recover. Don't disturb me. As Du Xiaoyao's voice fell, at the same time the illusion of the Five Fingers Mountain dissipated. It transformed into the palm-sized Five Fingers Mountain, and then directly shot into Du Xiaofu's chest and disappeared. At this moment, Du Xiaofu's figure appeared clearly in front of Yi Piaoling and Hua Fankong. Looking at Du Xiaofu, Yi Piaoling and Hua Fankong immediately looked behind Du Xiaofu. At this moment, on Du Xiaofu's back, there was a long broadsword wrapped in a piece of purple robe cloth. Even the sword hilt was tightly wrapped. In the end, it was tied into a knot and carried on his back. What are you carrying? It looks heavy. Yi Piaoling glanced at the broadsword wrapped on Du Xiaofu's back and asked curiously, a sword? It's not an ordinary sword. It's not bad for body training. Du Xiaofu smiled bitterly. His master, the weapon revered, said that it was not enough for him to put the heavenly palace of purple gold into the heavenly palace of purple gold for the time being. He was afraid that the soul of the murderous weapon would steal his qi and break the seal. He also needed to use the aura of the golden rock to suppress the murderous weapon's remaining power. Therefore, he could only carry the heavenly palace of purple gold on his back. In order to avoid attracting attention, Du Xiaofu finally tore apart the two purple robes in his Qinkuan bag. Then, he wrapped the heavenly palace of purple gold tightly and carried it on his back. However, the weight of the heavenly palace of purple gold was not ordinary. An ordinary meridian spirit realm cultivator might not be able to carry it. Du Xiaofu had a hard time carrying the heavenly palace of purple gold, so he had to treat it as body training. What's going on inside? Yi Piaoling heard and did not ask any more questions. Yes, what's going on inside? Are there any treasures? Is it the weapon-revered cave abode? Hua Fankong immediately came up and looked at Du Xiaofu expectantly. It's not the weapon-revered cave abode. There are no treasures either. Du Xiaofu looked at Yi Piaoling and Hua Fankong and said, I only got the sword on my back. It's both a blessing and a curse. I almost lost my life inside. It's good that you're fine. Yi Piaoling's expression did not change much. She was still quite calm. Only one sword? Hua Fankong was a little disappointed when he heard this. Originally, he thought that if there were really treasures inside, he might be able to get a share. At that time, this trip would not be in vain. This sword is extraordinary, but I don't know how to split it. I'll make it up to you when I have the chance. Du Xiaofu looked at Yi Piaoling and said, this time, not only did he get the peerless heavenly palace of purple gold, but he was also accepted as a disciple by the weapon-revered cave abode. This was a great opportunity. Yi Piaoling and Hua Fankong had been waiting outside. Naturally, Du Xiaofu felt that he should compensate them. However, the heavenly palace of purple gold was inseparable from the weapon-revered cave abode. It's nothing. It's not important. A rare smile appeared on Yi Piaoling's cold face. She waved the serene python in her hand and said, You only got a sword. I also have a serene python. I'm fine with it. I said that I'll just follow you guys. The treasures are not important. Hua Fankong immediately said, appearing very magnanimous. We'll talk about this later. Right now, let's leave this place first. I'm afraid that something will happen soon. Du Xiaofu could feel the space behind him. The four directions heaven ferocious seal that his master had set up was about to collapse. When that happened, all the experts would be attracted over. Hence, it was better to leave first. At this time, only Du Xiaofu knew that the real treasure was in his hands. Others came to find the treasure, so there was no need for him to stay. He didn't want to run into unnecessary trouble. Whoosh whoosh. After a while, the three of them flew into the sky and disappeared in a flash. Rumble. About an hour after Du Xiaofu and the other two left, The heavenly palace of purple gold in the deep valley began to collapse and explode. Then, it completely revealed itself. Another seal has appeared. There must be a treasure coming out. The real weapon-revered cave abode must have appeared. Let's go and get the treasure. Suddenly, countless figures flew out of the sealed area. All the experts felt the fluctuations from the seal's explosion and immediately rushed out. At this time, Du Xiaofu, Yi Piaoling, and Hua Fankong were already far away from the place where the seal exploded. Where are we going now? In the messy valley, Hua Fankong asked Du Xiaofu and Yi Piaoling. Du Xiaofu also stopped. He looked at Yi Piaoling and said, "What about you? Where do you plan to go?" "I have nowhere to go. I want to find the Medicine King. It's the same wherever I go." Yi Piaoling looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "What about you? Where do you plan to go?" "I'm going back to Tianwu Academy." Du Xiaofu calculated that it was about time. Now that the entire dark forest's attention was on the weapon-revered cave abode, no one would pay attention to him or the mysterious spirit Heavenly Vine. Therefore, it was time for him to return to the academy. He didn't want Ouyang Shuang and the little tiger to worry about him. As soon as he finished speaking, Du Xiaofu looked at Hua Fankong and took out his Qinkuan bag. After rummaging through his Qinkuan bag for a while, he took out a lot of things and put them into another Qinkuan bag. Then, he threw it to Hua Fankong. "This is my Qinkuan bag. It seems that there are many more things in it." Hua Fankong opened the Qinkuan bag and scanned it with his mind. He was pleasantly surprised. The items in this Qinkuan bag were the items in his Qinkuan bag. Although some of the items in the bag were no longer there, they were much more valuable than before. Du Xiaofu said to Hua Fankong, "I'll give you the things in this Qinkuan bag. All good things must come to an end. You don't have to follow us anymore." Hua Fankong looked at the Qinkuan bag in his hand, then looked at Du Xiaofu and Yi Piaoling. Just as he was about to say something, he suddenly looked up. Whoosh whoosh in the air. A pitch-black eagle demon beast flapped its wings. Its aura wasn't weak, and the airflow rippled as it flapped its wings. A spiritual pulse realm dark eagle. It's a rare mount in the Black Fiend sect. Those who can ride it are at least elders of the Black Mountain sect. Hua Fankong looked at the dark eagle in the air, and his expression changed slightly. He immediately put away the Qinkuan bag in his hand. Black Fiend sect. Du Xiaofu's eyes had already landed on the pitch-black body of the black underworld demon eagle. His eyes were even faster than Hua Fankong's. For Du Xiaofu, the three words Black Fiend sect definitely had an extremely special meaning. I've searched high and low for it, only to find it by chance. Hee, looks like my luck is pretty good. No one can save you today. Whoosh whoosh. As a sinister sneer sounded out, 5 figures landed one after another on the back of the dark eagle. Waves of astonishing baleful aura swept out as cold and gloomy gazes suddenly landed on Du Xiaofu's body. Amongst the 5 was a young man in black clothes. He looked to be around 25 or 26 years old. His expression was gloomy and his gaze was sinister. As he looked at Du Xiaofu, a cold sneer appeared from the corners of his mouth. Du Xiaofu's eyes narrowed as he looked at the young man in black. Soon after, a smile appeared from the corners of his mouth as well. However, a sinister glint flashed across his clear eyes as he softly muttered, "Enemies truly meet on a narrow road." Once again, I apologize and wish all readers a happy Mid-Autumn Festival.